There is a small town you have never visited, and yet, somehow, it already knows your name. Not because you have been there before, not because anyone is waiting for you, but because places like this have a quiet way of recognizing tired hearts. Tonight, there is nowhere you need to be, nothing you have to finish, nothing you have forgotten. The world can continue without you for a little while. For now, there is only this road. It winds gently through sleeping hills, following the slow curve of a river that reflects a sky full of quiet stars. The air carries the cool scent of pine, damp earth, and rain that must have fallen sometime before sunset. Far ahead, almost hidden by the darkness, a handful of warm lights rest against the hillside. They are not bright. They are not calling for attention. They simply exist, steady, patient, as though they have always been there, as though they knew one day you would need them. You continue walking, not because someone told you to, not because you are searching for anything, only because every step somehow feels lighter than the one before. The silence here is different. It isn't empty. It is full of tiny sounds that the daytime almost always forgets. Leaves moving softly somewhere above. Water brushing against smooth stones. A distant owl greeting the night. The gentle rhythm of your own breathing. You notice something curious. Without trying, you have already slowed down. Your shoulders no longer carry the weight they held only moments ago. Even your thoughts seem less interested in racing ahead. They begin to wander instead, like clouds drifting across the moon. The road bends once more, and then the town appears. Small stone houses sleep beneath dark blue rooftops. Golden windows glow like quiet promises. A narrow bridge crosses the river before disappearing into streets too peaceful to hurry through. Nothing here feels abandoned. Nothing feels lonely. Instead, everything feels as though it has simply been waiting. Waiting without impatience. Waiting without expectation. Just waiting. A wooden sign stands beside the entrance. Its letters have faded with time. You cannot read every word anymore. Only the last line remains clear beneath the moonlight. Walk gently. Someone may already be dreaming. You smile, almost without noticing. And for the first time today, you feel as though the night has found you. The place where the light still waited. The wooden bridge greets you with a quiet creak beneath your feet. It is an old sound, a familiar one, the kind of sound that belongs exactly where it is. Beneath the bridge, the river moves without hurry. It carries the moon in broken pieces across its gentle surface. For a moment, you stop in the middle, not because you are tired, simply because the night seems to be asking you to look. The water says nothing, and somehow, that feels comforting. You lean against the smooth wooden rail. Somewhere downstream, a frog calls once. A few seconds later, another answers. Then silence returns. Not an empty silence, but one that seems carefully woven together from countless tiny sounds. The breeze through the trees, the soft current below, leaves brushing against one another like whispered conversations. Even the stars seem quieter here. You close your eyes for just a single breath. When you open them again, the town feels closer. A narrow stone street stretches gently uphill. Its surface has been polished by countless footsteps over many years. People have walked this way carrying bread, letters, flowers, news, laughter, perhaps even sadness. And somehow, the street remembers all of them without holding on to any. You begin walking again. A lantern hangs outside the first cottage. Its light is warm rather than bright, just enough to remind the darkness that it does not have to carry the whole night alone. Beside the door sits a small pair of worn boots. Someone must have taken them off before going inside. There is something strangely peaceful about that. A quiet confidence that tomorrow will arrive exactly when it should. Across the street, lace curtains move gently behind an open window. Not from anyone watching, only from the cool evening air drifting through the room. For a brief moment, you catch the faint scent of fresh bread, mixed with chamomile, and wood warmed by an old fireplace. It feels less like passing a house and more like passing a memory. Further ahead, the street widens into a tiny square. At its center stands a single oak tree. Its branches reach outward like patient arms protecting the silence around them. Beneath the tree, an empty wooden bench waits. Not lonely, just available, as though it has all the time in the world. You think, perhaps you'll sit there soon, but not yet. For now, the town is gently introducing itself, one quiet breath at a time. And without realizing it, your own breathing has begun to follow its rhythm. The same slow rhythm the river already knew. The square is smaller than you first imagined. Only a few quiet buildings stand around it. A bakery, a tiny library, a workshop with an old clock hanging above its wooden door. Nothing here tries to impress anyone, and perhaps that is exactly why everything feels beautiful. The oak tree continues to watch over the square with quiet patience. Its branches sway almost imperceptibly, as though even the wind has learned not to hurry here. You finally sit down on the bench beneath it. The wood is cool, smooth with age. Someone has cared for it over many years. You wonder how many people have rested here before you. How many conversations began beneath these branches? How many silent evenings ended with nothing more than a grateful breath? Across the square, a warm glow appears behind the bakery window. The lights are still on, not brightly, just enough to paint soft amber reflections across the cobblestones. A moment later, the wooden door opens. An elderly man steps outside carrying a small lantern. He closes the door carefully behind him. Not quietly, carefully, as though he doesn't wish to wake the bread still resting inside. He notices you almost immediately. For a brief moment, the two of you simply smile. No questions, no surprise. Only the gentle recognition that sometimes happens between strangers who have arrived exactly where they were meant to be. He lifts the lantern slightly. Good evening. His voice is low, warm, almost as comforting as the scent of fresh bread drifting through the cool air. "I'm Walter." You return the greeting. Walter looks toward the dark hills surrounding the village. It usually takes people a little while before they notice. "Notice what?" you ask. He smiles again. "The quiet." You listen. At first, you hear nothing different. The river is still flowing. Leaves are still moving. Somewhere nearby, an owl softly calls into the night. Walter nods gently. "Exactly." He begins walking toward the bench, setting the lantern between you. The quiet here isn't the absence of sound. It's what happens when nothing asks anything from you anymore. Neither of you speaks after that. There is no need. The lantern glows softly between you. The village breathes around you. And somewhere inside your chest, something that had been holding itself tightly for far too long finally begins to let go. For the first time in many days, you are not waiting for tomorrow. You are simply here. And somehow, here feels enough. Walter stood slowly, brushing a few tiny crumbs from his apron. "They'll be wondering where I've disappeared to," he said with a quiet smile. He picked up the lantern, then paused before taking another step. "If you happen to wake early tomorrow," he looked toward the river beyond the square, "follow the smell of fresh bread. I always make more than the village can eat." He gave a small nod, as though someone unexpected might arrive. Before you could answer, he had already crossed the square. The lantern swayed gently in his hand until the bakery door opened once more. A ribbon of warm light spilled across the cobblestones, then disappeared. The square became quiet again. Not emptier, simply quieter. You remained beneath the old oak tree. Above you, the branches moved with the slow confidence of something that had watched countless seasons come and go. One leaf drifted softly through the air. It landed beside the bench without making a sound. You smiled. Some places seemed to understand that silence did not need protecting. It simply needed room. After a little while, you stood and continued walking. Millhaven was never built in straight lines. Its streets curved naturally around the hills, the river, and the old stone walls that had been standing longer than anyone could remember. Nothing felt planned. Everything felt discovered. A narrow lane led you toward the edge of the village. Small cottages rested behind white wooden fences. Climbing roses reached lazily toward upstairs windows. A sleeping cat lay curled upon a flat stone, giving you only the briefest glance before deciding you posed no concern worth waking for. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime answered the evening breeze. Its notes were soft, almost uncertain, as though it too preferred whispering over speaking. Farther along the lane, another light remained awake. Not from a home, but from a small building tucked quietly between two ancient maple trees. Its windows were tall. Golden light rested behind shelves that reached almost to the ceiling. Books, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Above the door hung a hand-painted sign, Millhaven Library. One corner of the sign had weathered with age, but someone had carefully repaired it rather than replacing it. You liked that. Some things deserved mending, not exchanging. The front door stood slightly open, just enough to suggest that visitors were still welcome. Inside, a page turned, slowly, then another. No voices, only the gentle sound of paper meeting paper. You stepped onto the worn stone path leading to the entrance. For reasons you couldn't quite explain, it already felt as though someone inside had been expecting you. The old wooden door offered only the slightest resistance before opening. A tiny brass bell above it chimed once, softly, not announcing your arrival, simply acknowledging it. Warm air wrapped around you. It carried the unmistakable scent of old paper, polished wood, and tea that had long since cooled beside someone's chair. The library was larger than it had seemed from outside. Books climbed every wall from floor to ceiling. Their spines were faded in different shades of green, brown, navy, and burgundy. Some leaned gently against one another. Others stood proudly, perfectly straight, as though they had been waiting years for the right hands to find them. Small lamps rested on wooden tables throughout the room. None of them were especially bright. Together, however, they made the entire library glow like a sky filled with quiet little stars. You walked slowly between the shelves, not searching for any particular book, simply enjoying the feeling that every story here had found its place. A clock somewhere deeper inside the building ticked patiently, not loudly, just enough to remind the room that time still existed, even if nobody seemed interested in chasing it. Near one of the windows stood a reading chair with a knitted blanket folded neatly across its arm. Beside it rested a small teacup, half full, still warm enough for a ribbon of steam to rise into the light. Whoever had been sitting there couldn't have gone very far. You paused beside a shelf labeled simply, "Local Stories." There were no famous names, no grand adventures, only quiet titles. The miller who never locked his door. The river that forgot winter. Letters never sent. When the swallows returned. You found yourself smiling again. This village seemed to believe that ordinary lives were worthy of being remembered. And perhaps they always had been. A page turned somewhere behind the shelves, then another, followed by the gentle sound of a book being closed. Footsteps approached at an unhurried pace. When she finally appeared, she seemed almost like another part of the library itself. She was perhaps in her late 60s. Silver hair gathered loosely behind her head. Round spectacles rested low on her nose. Her cardigan looked as though it had been mended more than once, carefully, lovingly. She carried 2 books against her chest. When she noticed you, she smiled. Not with surprise, with recognition, as though meeting new visitors had always been one of her favorite chapters. "Good evening," she said quietly. "I'm Eleanor." There was something about her voice that reminded you of rain falling gently against a window long after everyone had gone to sleep. "You've arrived at a very good hour." You tilted your head slightly. The books become wonderfully patient after sunset. For a moment, you almost believed they did. The place where the light still waited. Eleanor placed the 2 books gently onto a small oak table, not because they were heavy, but because every book, she believed, deserved to be set down with care. She noticed your eyes wandering across the shelves. "It happens to everyone," she said with a quiet smile. "They always think they'll choose a book." She paused for just a moment, and then the room chooses for them. The words were spoken so lightly that they felt less like a belief and more like something the library itself had quietly discovered over the years. You smiled. "I'm not sure what I'm looking for." Eleanor nodded. "That usually helps." She picked up a small brass oil lamp from the desk. Its flame barely moved. "You'll find that Millhaven is very patient. It never expects people to arrive with answers." She began walking slowly between the shelves. You followed without thinking. Every few steps she stopped, gently straightening a book that had leaned slightly to one side. Not because it needed fixing, simply because she noticed. "There," she smiled to herself. "Much better." You wondered how long she had worked here. Before you could ask, she answered as though she had heard the question anyway. "I stopped counting years a long time ago. The books remember much better than I do." The two of you reached a tall window overlooking the river. Outside, moonlight rested softly upon the water. The village had grown even quieter. Some of the windows you had noticed earlier were dark now. Families had finished their conversations. Candles had been blown out. Children were dreaming. Only a handful of warm lights still remained. Eleanor watched them for a while. Every evening, I try to guess who is still awake. The baker usually stays up the latest. She smiled, though he'd never admit he's really waiting for tomorrow's bread. A soft laugh escaped you. It was small, almost surprising, as though you hadn't expected laughter to belong so naturally inside such a quiet place. Eleanor looked pleased. "Good. What?" You laughed. She adjusted her glasses. "This room always sounds a little brighter after that." Silence settled between you once again. Comfortable, unhurried. The kind of silence that never asks to be filled. Then Eleanor reached toward a nearby shelf. Instead of choosing one of the larger books, she pulled out a very small one. Its cover was made of faded blue cloth. No title, no author's name. Only a tiny silver star pressed into the corner. She held it for a moment before offering it to you. "We don't lend this one." You looked at the plain little book. "No?" She shook her head gently. "It prefers to travel with people. Only while they're here." You accepted it carefully. The cover felt warm, as though someone else had been holding it only moments before. And somehow, it already felt familiar. The little blue book rested quietly in your hands. It was lighter than you expected. Its cloth cover had softened over time, the edges gently worn by years of careful use. You traced the tiny silver star with your thumb. It caught the lamplight for only a moment before fading back into the blue. "There are no chapters," Eleanor said, "and no page numbers." You looked up. "No page numbers." She smiled. "Not every journey needs to know where it is." For a moment, neither of you spoke. The library seemed to breathe around you. Somewhere in the distance, the old clock marked another passing minute. One quiet tick, followed by another. Outside, the branches of the maple trees brushed gently against the windows. Not loudly, just enough to remind the room that the night was still awake. You opened the book. The first page was almost empty. Only a single sentence had been written in careful handwriting. Every heart arrives carrying something unseen. You read it once, then again. There was nothing complicated about the words, yet they seemed to settle somewhere deeper than thought. You turned the page. Another sentence waited there. Nothing becomes lighter by being hurried. A small smile appeared without asking your permission. It reminded you of something you had forgotten, though you couldn't have said exactly what. Eleanor had quietly returned to her desk. She wasn't watching you. She had already opened another book of her own. Its pages reflected softly in her round spectacles. From time to time, she turned a page, never rushing, never lingering, simply allowing the story to move at its own pace. The library had fallen into one of those rare silences that never felt empty. It was filled with breathing, with turning pages, with old wood settling gently into itself, with the faint scent of chamomile drifting from the forgotten teacup. You continued reading, not searching for meaning, only following the calm rhythm of one page after another. Outside, another light disappeared across the square, then another. Millhaven seemed to be folding itself gently into sleep. Not all at once, but little by little, like someone carefully closing the pages of a beloved book. You glanced toward the window. The river still carried silver ribbons of moonlight through the village. Steady, patient, unconcerned with the passing hours. For the first time in a very long while, you realized you had stopped wondering what time it was. And strangely, you didn't miss knowing. Because here, nothing important seemed to depend on the hour, only on the quiet. And tonight, there was more than enough of it. After a while, you closed the little blue book. Not because you had reached an ending, only because it somehow felt complete for now. Eleanor looked up from her own pages. "There," she said softly. "It always knows when enough has been said." She stood and carefully returned the small book to the same place on the shelf. Not hidden, simply waiting for whoever might need it next. You found yourself wondering how many hands had held it before yours. How many quiet evenings, how many tired travelers, how many restless hearts. Some questions, you realized, were kinder without answers. Eleanor walked you to the front door. Outside, the night had grown deeper. The sky above Millhaven was scattered with stars so clear that they seemed almost close enough to touch. A cool breeze wandered through the narrow streets, carrying the scent of pine and distant water. Before you stepped outside, Eleanor spoke once more. "If you keep following this road," she pointed gently toward a narrow lane disappearing between two stone cottages, "you'll see a light that never seems to go out before midnight." You smiled. "Another bakery?" A quiet laugh escaped her. "No. A clockmaker." She opened the door a little wider. George believes clocks sleep better after they've been listened to. You weren't entirely sure what that meant. Somehow, you didn't feel the need to ask. You thanked her. She nodded once. Good night. There was something unusual about the way she said it. Not as a farewell, more as a blessing gently placed into the evening. The library door closed behind you with a soft click. The brass bell chimed one last time. Then the street welcomed you again. The cobblestones still held a little warmth from the day. The village breathed slowly around you. A curtain moved in an upstairs window. Somewhere nearby, a kettle began to whistle before quickly falling silent. A cat stretched lazily beneath a garden gate. Nothing remarkable, nothing extraordinary, and perhaps that was the extraordinary part. You followed the narrow lane Eleanor had shown you. It curved gently between old stone walls where ivy climbed patiently toward the moonlight. The houses became fewer. The sounds became softer. Then, far ahead, you noticed it. One small window, warm against the darkness. Not bright enough to guide a traveler, just bright enough to say, someone is still awake. Without thinking, you slowed your steps. Not because you were tired, but because places like Millhaven deserve to be approached gently. And somehow, that little light felt as though it had been waiting for you all evening. The place where the light still waited. The light remained steady as you walked closer. It wasn't bright enough to spill far into the street. It simply rested behind the old glass, warm and unwavering. Above the window hung a weathered wooden sign. Its paint had faded over the years, but the lettering was still clear. George's Clock Shop. The window itself was unlike any you had seen before. Dozens of clocks filled the shelves. Tall grandfather clocks stood quietly beside smaller mantel clocks. Tiny brass carriage clocks rested between polished wooden timepieces. Each one showed a slightly different time. At first, it seemed like a mistake. Then you realized, perhaps it wasn't. The front door was open just enough for the scent of cedar wood and machine oil to drift into the cool evening air. You stepped inside. The shop was wrapped in the gentle sound of ticking. Not one rhythm, but many. Some clocks ticked slowly, others a little faster. Together, they formed something strangely peaceful, like rain falling across different rooftops. No clock tried to overpower another. Each simply kept its own patient conversation with time. At the back of the workshop, a small lamp illuminated an old wooden workbench. Bent over a pocket watch sat an elderly man wearing a wool vest with rolled-up sleeves. A tiny magnifying lens rested before one eye. Without looking up, he smiled. "I wondered if you'd come tonight." His voice carried the quiet certainty of someone greeting an old friend rather than a stranger. He placed the watch gently onto a folded cloth before removing the magnifying lens. "Good evening. I'm George." You introduced yourself. George nodded once, as though he had expected exactly that name. He never asked where you had come from, nor why you had arrived. Some questions, it seemed, belonged to roads rather than destinations. He picked up the small pocket watch again. Its silver case reflected the warm glow of the lamp. "Most people think I repair clocks." He smiled softly. "I don't. You looked around the room. No? George carefully listened to the tiny ticking inside the watch before answering. I simply helped them remember their own rhythm. The words lingered in the workshop like the last note of a familiar melody. He set the watch aside and reached for another. This one was older. Its wooden frame carried tiny scratches gathered over many decades. He ran his fingertips gently across its surface. You can learn a great deal, he said quietly, from things that have never been in a hurry. Around you, the clocks continued their patient chorus, not counting time, only keeping company with it. And somehow, standing there among their quiet voices, you found yourself breathing a little more slowly than before. George placed the old clock gently upon the workbench. He never seemed to put anything down, only to return it. There was a difference. You noticed it without quite knowing why. Every movement inside the little workshop carried the same quiet care. The cloth beneath each clock was folded neatly. Every tiny screwdriver rested in its own place. Even the small jars of polished brass screws seemed arranged with a kind of calm purpose. Nothing felt perfect. Everything simply felt loved. George noticed your eyes wandering around the room. They've all found their places, he said. The tools? He smiled. The clocks. He looked around the workshop as though introducing old friends. They don't like being crowded. A soft chuckle escaped him. Neither do I. You smiled. Outside, a breeze brushed gently against the window. The hanging sign creaked once, then settled again. George reached beneath the workbench and lifted a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of tiny winding keys. No two looked exactly alike. Some were polished smooth with age. Others carried delicate patterns carved into their handles. He picked one almost without looking. This one belongs to Mrs. Carter. He held it for a moment. She always forgets where she leaves it. Another key. This one's Walter's. You couldn't help smiling. He forgets it too? George laughed softly. No. He remembers. But he enjoys stopping by. He carefully returned the keys to the box. Sometimes people think they're bringing me clocks. He closed the lid with a gentle click. But most evenings, they're really just bringing themselves. The room became quiet again, not awkwardly, comfortably. One clock chimed somewhere high upon the wall, only once. Its note floated gently through the workshop before disappearing into the steady chorus of ticking. You looked toward the shelves. There were clocks from different generations, different homes, different lives, each one carrying its own small history. Yet together, they somehow belonged. George followed your gaze. People often worry about losing time. He adjusted the sleeve of his old wool sweater. I've never understood that. He smiled toward the oldest grandfather clock in the room. Time has never once forgotten where to find us. The words were spoken so gently, they felt less like wisdom and more like something he had quietly noticed after many peaceful years. Neither of you spoke after that. There was no need. The clocks continued their patient conversation. The lamp burned with its small golden flame. Beyond the window, Millhaven rested beneath a sky full of stars. And somewhere, far across the sleeping village, the river continued carrying the moon, exactly as it always had. George reached for the little brass lamp that stood on the corner of his workbench. Its flame had grown smaller, not because it was fading, only because the night had grown deeper. He adjusted the wick ever so slightly. The light became warm again. There, George. That's better. You found yourself smiling. He had spoken to the lamp exactly as he might have spoken to an old friend. George noticed your expression. I know. He laughed quietly. I talk to almost everything in here. His eyes wandered across the room. Clocks, lamps, old chairs, the kettle. He shrugged gently. They've all kept me company. Outside, a soft wind wandered through the narrow streets of Millhaven. The workshop window trembled almost imperceptibly. George listened for a moment. Rain tomorrow. You looked toward the clear sky beyond the glass. There aren't any clouds. Not yet, he smiled, but the trees already know. Silence returned. You realized something curious. None of the conversations you had shared since arriving in Millhaven had felt like conversations at all. No one hurried to fill the quiet. No one searched for clever words. People simply allowed thoughts to arrive when they were ready. George folded a clean linen cloth over the watch he had been repairing. I should let it rest. The watch? So should the man repairing it. Another gentle laugh escaped the two of you. He slipped the tiny pocket watch into a small wooden drawer and closed it carefully. Not to hide it, simply to let it wait until morning. George walked with you to the front door. The village was quieter now than it had been at any point that evening. Only a handful of windows still glowed softly in the distance. The river continued its slow conversation with the stones beneath the bridge. George rested one hand on the old door frame. Then, he tilted his head slightly. Listen. You stood very still. At first, you heard only the familiar sounds of the sleeping village. Leaves, water, the breeze. Then, almost too softly to be certain, a single violin note drifted through the night. It floated across the rooftops, unhurried, gentle, neither joyful nor sad, simply present. Another note followed, then another. George closed his eyes for a brief moment. That's Elias. His voice was almost no louder than the music itself. He never plays for an audience. He only plays, George smiled, until the village falls asleep. Neither of you spoke again. The melody continued to drift across Millhaven, rising gently above the rooftops, before settling once more into the quiet. And somehow, the entire village seemed to breathe in time with the music. The music lingered in the air long after the final note had faded. Not because it echoed, but because silence had made room for it. George opened his eyes. He'll be down by the river, he smiled. He almost always is. You thanked him for the evening. He gave a small wave before quietly closing the workshop door. The little lamp inside remained glowing behind the window. One more warm light, keeping watch over the sleeping village. You followed the sound of the violin. It wasn't difficult. The melody never hurried away from you. It simply floated through the narrow streets, brushing against old stone walls and climbing gently through the branches of the trees. The path slowly led downhill, past the bakery, past the library, across the old wooden bridge where the river whispered beneath your feet. Beyond the bridge, a narrow footpath curved alongside the water. Wildflowers rested quietly among the tall grass. The air had grown cooler now, fresh, clean. You took a slow breath. The scent of pine mixed with the sweetness of damp earth after sunset. Ahead, beneath the branches of an old willow tree, someone sat on a weathered wooden bench. A violin rested beneath his chin. His eyes were closed, not in concentration, but in comfort, as though he had played this same melody so many evenings that his hands no longer needed directions. The bow moved lightly across the strings. Each note seemed to rise like a ripple across the river. Nothing dramatic, nothing demanding, just gentle music, made for anyone who happened to be passing by. You stayed where you were. It somehow felt right not to interrupt. After another quiet moment, the melody came to its natural end, not with a flourish, only with a single note that drifted softly into the night. The man lowered the violin. He opened his eyes. For a heartbeat, he simply watched the river. Then he noticed you. His smile appeared slowly, warmly, as though strangers were simply friends whose names he hadn't learned yet. "You must be new." His voice carried the same calm rhythm as his music. You nodded. "I arrived this evening." He looked toward the river again. "The village has good timing." You couldn't help smiling. It seems everyone here says things differently. A quiet laugh escaped him. Perhaps. He rested the violin carefully inside an old leather case. Or perhaps, we've simply stopped trying to say too much. He stood. The willow leaves stirred gently overhead. "I'm Elias." You introduced yourself. He offered a small nod. "Would you like to walk?" He wasn't inviting you somewhere. He was simply continuing the evening. And somehow, that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Elias waited while you joined him beside the river. Neither of you felt the need to hurry. The footpath stretched quietly beneath the willow trees, following every gentle curve of the water, as though it had learned its shape many years ago. For a while, the only sound between you was the soft rhythm of your footsteps. Gravel shifted beneath your shoes. The river whispered beside you. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called once, before the village folded back into silence. Elias carried his violin case in one hand. It looked old. The leather had softened with age. Its corners had faded from years of being carried through the same familiar streets. "You've had that case for a long time," you said. He looked down at it and smiled. "Long enough that it knows the way home better than I do." The answer made you smile. He noticed. "Most things improve with a little time," he said. "Leather, wood, friendships." He paused. "Even silence." The path narrowed for a moment as it passed between two ancient oak trees. Their branches reached across the trail, forming a quiet arch above your heads. Moonlight slipped through the leaves in scattered silver patches. They moved gently across the ground as the breeze wandered through the branches. Elias slowed his pace. "I like this part." The trees? He nodded. They've been greeting people long before I was born. You looked up. Their trunks were wide enough that it would take several people holding hands to reach around them. Tiny patches of moss covered the roots. Wildflowers had found small places to bloom where the earth softened near the riverbank. They remind me, Elias said, that growing slowly isn't the same as standing still. You walked a little farther before noticing a flat stone resting near the edge of the river. Someone had painted a tiny white bird upon it. Nothing more. No signature. No message. Just a small bird. Elias smiled when he saw you looking at it. Every spring, someone paints another one. Who? He shrugged. No one ever says. And no one asks. The river carried a ribbon of moonlight past the stone. For a while, both of you simply watched it pass. Then Elias spoke again. When I was younger, I thought music was something you performed. He looked toward the quiet village behind you. Now, I think it's something you leave behind. The breeze lifted a few willow leaves into the air. They drifted slowly across the river, touching the water so lightly that they barely disturbed its surface. Neither of you tried to fill the silence that followed. The night was already doing that beautifully on its own. Ahead, the path curved gently toward a small hill where another warm light waited in the distance. Without saying a word, the two of you continued walking toward it. The light ahead never seemed to grow brighter. It simply grew closer, as though it had been waiting exactly where it belonged, without ever asking to be found. The path rose gently toward a small hill overlooking Millhaven. From there, the village looked different. Not larger, only quieter. Golden windows rested among dark rooftops like scattered stars that had chosen the earth instead of the sky. The river curved peacefully through the middle of it all. Its silver surface reflected the moon in slow, broken ribbons. Elias stopped walking. This is my favorite view. You stood beside him. Neither of you spoke for a while. There was nothing missing from the silence. Far below, a single chimney released a thin ribbon of smoke that disappeared into the cool night air. Somewhere, a dog barked once. Another answered from farther away. Then the village settled once again into its gentle rhythm. It changes every night, Elias said. The village? He shook his head. The feeling. You looked at him. I used to think this place stayed exactly the same. A faint smile appeared, but I was wrong. He looked toward the river. The streets don't change very much. The houses don't. The trees hardly notice the years. He paused. It's the people who arrive differently. You followed his gaze toward the sleeping village. I suppose they do. They bring different days with them. His words drifted away with the breeze. You thought about Walter, carefully closing the bakery door behind him. About Eleanor, placing every book back onto the shelf as though returning it home. About George, listening to clocks instead of correcting them. None of them had tried to teach you anything. None of them had offered advice. Yet somehow, being near them had made the world feel lighter. Elias rested the violin case on the grass beside him. My father used to bring me here. He looked toward the horizon, where the last trace of twilight had long since disappeared. We wouldn't talk very much. What did you do? He smiled. We watched windows. Windows? He nodded. We'd guess who was still awake. You laughed softly. So that's where everyone learns it. Elias laughed too. Perhaps. He pointed toward a tiny golden light near the edge of the village. That's Walter. Another. There. Eleanor. A third light glowed farther away, almost hidden behind a row of old trees. And George. You noticed one more window, smaller than the others. Its light was gentle, almost hidden. What about that one? Elias looked for a moment. His smile became quieter. No one knows. The light is always there, but no one ever seems to see anyone come or go. The two of you simply watched it together, not trying to solve the mystery, only appreciating that every village deserves to keep one small secret. Above you, the stars shone patiently. Below, Millhaven rested in the comforting certainty that tomorrow would arrive exactly when it was meant to. For a long while, neither of you looked away from the small window. Its light remained soft, unchanging, not brighter than before, not dimmer. Simply there, a quiet promise resting among the rooftops of Millhaven. Elias folded his hands loosely in front of him. When I was a boy, I asked everyone about that window. You turned toward him. What did they say? He smiled to himself. They all gave me different answers. Walter said someone was always baking. Eleanor thought someone simply enjoyed reading late into the night. George believed, he paused for a moment, that whoever lived there preferred listening to silence before going to sleep. You smiled. And what do you believe now? Elias looked back toward the distant light. I don't think it matters. The answer settled gently between you. We don't need to know every story to be comforted by the fact that it exists. A cool breeze wandered across the hillside. The tall grass leaned together, then slowly rose again. Somewhere below, the river continued its endless journey through the village, always moving, never rushing. The violin case rested quietly beside Elias. He reached down and brushed a single willow leaf from its handle. My mother used to tell me something. What was it? He watched the leaf drift away in the wind. She said, "Every village keeps one light for people who arrive carrying more than they can explain." You said nothing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the words felt complete, exactly as they were. The two of you remained on the hill, watching, breathing, listening. Below, another window grew dark. Someone had finished the day. A few moments later, another followed. Millhaven was slowly closing its eyes. One family, one room, one quiet breath at a time. Only a handful of lights still glowed now. Walter's bakery, George's workshop. Perhaps Eleanor was placing one last book back upon its shelf. And far away, the unknown window continued to shine without asking anyone to understand why. You found yourself wondering, not who lived there, but who might someday need to see it. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps every place, no matter how small, needed one light that stayed on a little longer than the rest. Not to guide the lost, not to answer questions, only to remind anyone passing by that somewhere, someone had left a little warmth in the darkness. Elias took one slow breath. It'll be late soon. His voice was barely louder than the wind, but Millhaven never minds. It knows tomorrow doesn't begin until everyone has found their way home. The village rested below you. The stars rested above you. And somewhere between them, so did you. For a little while, nothing happened. No one seemed to mind. The workshop rested quietly beneath the warm glow of the oil lamp. Outside, the night continued its patient journey across Millhaven. The moon had climbed a little higher. Its light reached the garden from a different angle now. The lavender cast shorter shadows across the gravel path. You noticed them only because they had quietly become something new. Emil remained by the workbench. His hands rested gently on the wood. They were not waiting for another clock. They simply belonged there. After a long moment, he reached for a small, well-worn brush. Its wooden handle had grown smooth over many years. He turned it once between his fingers. Slowly, almost absent-mindedly. Then he laid it back down. Not because he had finished using it, only because, for tonight, it had already done enough. Near the window stood a small rosemary plant. Its leaves caught a narrow ribbon of moonlight. Emil walked over with the tiny watering can. He poured only a little water, no more than the soil seemed ready to receive. One drop clung to the edge of the spout. It gathered there for a moment, before quietly disappearing into the earth. Nothing hurried it. Nothing delayed it. Nearby, Clara stood before the little bookshelf that had found a home inside the workshop. She did not choose a book. Instead, her eyes wandered slowly across the familiar spines. One title caught her attention: The Slow Growth of Things. She smiled, not because she intended to read it, perhaps because she already remembered how it felt. She left it exactly where it was. Outside, a soft breeze drifted through the open window. The scent had changed again. The lavender remained, but now, cool earth carried its own quiet fragrance. Somewhere beyond the garden, grass released the warmth it had gathered throughout the day. The night never stayed exactly the same. It simply changed, so gently that nothing ever felt interrupted. You stepped closer to the old grandfather clock near the wall. Inside its wooden door, small pencil marks had been written over many years. Dates, names, tiny notes. Most had faded. One line remained surprisingly clear. Still here. You read it once, then again, not searching for meaning, only appreciating that someone, long ago, had felt grateful enough to leave those two quiet words behind. Emil came to stand beside you. He looked at the writing for a moment. His fingertips rested softly against the wood, not over the words, beside them, as though even memories deserved a little space. Neither of you spoke. Outside, the river continued its endless conversation with the stones. Inside, The clocks answered in their own gentle rhythm. And somewhere between those two quiet worlds, you noticed that your thoughts no longer seemed eager to arrive anywhere. They simply moved, one peaceful breath at a time. The workshop settled into itself, not because anything had changed, only because the night had continued quietly around it. The oil lamp burned with the same gentle flame. Its light rested on the workbench, on the old rocking chair, and on the small bowl that still held Martin's pocket watch. Outside, the garden had become softer. Dew now rested on the lavender. Each tiny drop reflected a different piece of the moon. None of them stayed bright for long. As the branches moved, the light wandered on. You stepped toward the open doorway. The cool air met the warmth of the workshop. Neither hurried the other away. For a moment, they simply shared the same space. Clara stood near the shelves. She lifted neither a book nor a teacup. Instead, she straightened a folded linen cloth that had slipped ever so slightly toward the edge of the table. Only a finger's width, nothing more. Then she left it alone. Emile noticed. He offered the smallest nod, the kind that needed no reply. Somewhere beyond the garden, an owl called once. The sound lingered among the trees before fading gently into the river. No other owl answered. The silence that followed felt complete. A breeze drifted across the porch. The hanging herbs turned almost imperceptibly. Lavender, sage, rosemary. Their shadows moved across the whitewashed wall like slow hands passing over quiet water. You watched them for a while, not because they were remarkable, because they were enough. Near the porch steps, a single maple seed spun lazily through the air. It landed upright between two stones. There it remained, perfectly ordinary, perfectly at rest. Inside, one of the old clocks gave a soft wooden click. Not the ticking, something deeper. The kind of sound old houses sometimes make when they remember the warmth of the day. Emile looked toward it. He did not rise. He did not inspect it. After a moment, he simply smiled to himself. Whatever the sound had meant, it belonged. The river continued to murmur beyond the trees. Far away, perhaps by the water's edge, a violin offered only 3 quiet notes, nothing more. The melody did not ask to be followed. It simply passed through the village, like moonlight crossing a garden path. Clara closed her eyes for a single breath. When she opened them again, she looked exactly as before, only somehow a little lighter. You rested your hand on the smooth wooden frame of the doorway. The grain beneath your fingertips had been shaped by many years, many seasons, many quiet evenings, many people who had paused here without needing to be anywhere else. You found yourself doing the same, not waiting, not thinking, simply standing where the warm light ended and the silver night began. And for the first time since arriving in Millhaven, you could no longer tell whether you were visiting the village or whether the village had quietly begun to make room for you. No one moved for a while. The village seemed perfectly content to continue without asking anything of the evening. The porch held its quiet balance between the warmth of the workshop and the coolness of the garden. Behind you, the clocks continued their gentle conversation, not together, never quite apart, each one keeping its own faithful rhythm. Outside, the moon climbed a little higher. Its light reached the top leaves of the old linden before slowly finding the branches below. The shadows beneath the tree shifted almost too slowly to notice. Only after a long while did you realize they had moved at all. A small moth returned to the window. It circled the lamp once, then again. This time it did not settle on the frame. Instead, it came to rest beneath one broad rosemary leaf, hidden from the light. Perhaps that was where it wished to spend the night. Emile noticed it. His eyes lingered there for only a moment. Then he quietly lowered the wick of the oil lamp. Only a little, not enough to darken the room, just enough to leave the moth undisturbed. The workshop became softer. The brass clocks reflected a warmer glow now. The polished wood absorbed more of the shadows. Nothing had become difficult to see. Everything had simply become gentler. Clara walked slowly to the bookshelf. A thin notebook rested where she had left it earlier. She lifted it carefully. Between its pages lay a pressed fern. Its delicate shape remained perfectly still. She looked at it for a few quiet seconds, then closed the notebook once more. It did not need to be opened tonight. Some memories were already exactly where they belonged. A breeze crossed the garden. The lavender bowed together, then rose again. No two stems moved in quite the same way, yet somehow they always found one another again. You rested your hand against the porch railing. The wood felt cool now. The warmth of the day had almost completely faded. Only a faint trace remained, enough to remind the night that morning had once been here. Far beyond the trees, the river continued its patient journey. The violin had fallen silent. Even so, it felt as though the air still remembered where the music had been. Perhaps sound, like light, did not disappear all at once. Perhaps it simply became part of everything else. You stood there for another quiet moment, watching nothing in particular, listening without searching, breathing without noticing. And somewhere, between the ticking clocks, the sleeping garden, and the slow river beyond, you realized that the evening had stopped asking you to follow it. Instead, it had gently begun to walk beside you. The night rested gently over Millhaven, not like a blanket, more like clear water settling over smooth stones. Nothing beneath it disappeared. Everything simply became quieter. The porch remained where you had left it. The open doorway, the warm light, the garden waiting patiently beyond. Inside the workshop, one of the clocks gave a soft, steady tick. Another answered a heartbeat later. Neither hurried to catch the other. Each seemed content to keep its own promise. The rosemary by the window moved ever so slightly, not because the wind had grown stronger, only because the air itself was still wandering through the room. Its scent lingered longer now, fresh, earthy, almost sweet. The moth beneath the leaf had not moved. Its tiny wings rested without the slightest tremble. Nearby, a single strand of spider silk stretched between the window frame and the herb shelf. You had not noticed it before. Now, the moonlight found it. For one quiet moment, it shimmered like a thread of silver. Then the light continued on. The thread remained, no less beautiful, simply unseen again. Clara stepped quietly onto the porch. She carried nothing, not a book, not a cup. She rested one hand lightly against the wooden railing. The cool wood seemed familiar beneath her fingers, as though this simple gesture had ended many evenings before this one. She looked toward the garden, not searching, not thinking, only sharing the same stillness. Emile stayed inside. He opened a small drawer near the workbench. Inside lay several neatly folded polishing cloths. He chose none of them. After a brief glance, he closed the drawer again. Some things were already exactly as they needed to be. Beyond the garden, the river continued its quiet journey through the village. The sound rose and faded with the breeze. Sometimes it seemed close enough to touch. Sometimes it drifted away among the trees. You realized it had never truly become louder or softer. Only your listening had changed. Far above, the stars appeared untouched. Yet one by one, they seemed to emerge from places your eyes had overlooked before. Perhaps they had been waiting there all along, patient, unhurried. The old rocking chair moved almost imperceptibly, not because anyone had touched it. A faint breath of air had found it as it passed through the room. Forward, back, then still again. The movement lasted only a few seconds, but somehow it felt perfectly complete. You took one slow breath, then another. The cool night, the warm wood, the quiet clocks, the distant river. None of them asked for your attention, and perhaps that was why they received it so easily. For a long while, nothing asked to be remembered. Nothing asked to be understood. The night simply continued, just as rivers do, just as trees do, and just as peaceful hearts sometimes do, when they are finally allowed to rest. No one seemed eager to leave. The workshop had quietly become one more room within the night, not separate from it, simply another place where darkness and light had agreed to share the same space. Outside, the breeze wandered slowly through the garden. The lavender answered first, then the rosemary. A little farther away, the leaves of the old linden joined in. None of the sounds arrived together. Each waited its turn. Inside, the workshop listened. The old floorboards had grown still beneath your feet. Only now and then, a single board released the warmth it had held since the afternoon. A soft wooden sigh, then silence again. Emile heard it. He looked toward the floor for a brief moment, not to inspect it, only to acknowledge it. Then his attention drifted back to the room. The clocks continued without interruption, steady, patient. Their rhythm no longer felt like the passing of time. It felt like the room breathing. Clara crossed to the window. She noticed a small ceramic bowl resting on the sill. Inside were smooth river stones, no larger than walnuts. Their surfaces had been polished by many years of flowing water. She picked one up, turned it slowly between her fingers. The stone caught a narrow ribbon of moonlight. For a moment, it seemed almost translucent. Then she placed it gently beside the bowl instead of returning it inside, as though tonight it deserved a little more moonlight. Nothing else changed. The garden remained peaceful. The moth still rested beneath its leaf. Beyond the workshop, the river continued its endless conversation with the banks that had guided it for generations. You found yourself listening differently now. Earlier, you had listened for sounds. Now, you listened for spaces between them. The quiet after a clock settled. The pause before the breeze returned. The stillness that followed a distant bird. Those spaces never felt empty. They seemed to hold the whole village together. A faint scent of cedar drifted through the room, perhaps from an old drawer, perhaps from the beams overhead. It mingled with the rosemary, the lavender, and the lingering warmth of baked bread that still seemed to belong to Millhaven itself. The rocking chair gave the gentlest movement, forward, then back. It stopped exactly where it had begun, as though even it understood that some journeys do not need to end somewhere new. You rested your hand once more against the doorframe. The wood felt cooler now than it had only a short while ago. Night was quietly leaving its touch on everything, without hurry, without asking permission. And somehow, the workshop did not seem to grow older with the passing hours. It simply became more completely itself. The workshop remained awake. Then no one seemed to be working anymore. The clocks continued in their quiet rhythm. The river continued beyond the trees. And somewhere outside, the breeze wandered through the sleeping gardens of Millhaven. The door stayed open, only a little, just enough for the cool night air to drift inside. It crossed the wooden floor without a sound, touched the edge of the workbench, brushed the linen cloth, then disappeared quietly into the room. Emile reached for the small oil lamp. He did not lift it. Instead, he turned it ever so slightly, only enough for its warm light to fall across the doorway instead of the wall. The room itself hardly changed, but the threshold became brighter. A place where warm light and silver moonlight met without either asking the other to move aside. Outside, a cricket had begun its steady evening song. Not loud, not hidden, simply present. The sound rose from the grass, paused for a breath, then continued again, as though the night itself had found another quiet voice. Clara walked toward the shelf beneath the window. There stood a small wooden box. Its lid was slightly open. Inside rested several smooth river stones, a few pressed leaves, and a tiny feather no larger than her hand. She looked at them for a moment, then gently closed the lid, not to hide them, only to let them rest. A narrow beam of moonlight slipped across the floor. It reached the old rocking chair, then the chair's curved arm. For a little while, the polished wood carried both lights at once, the warm amber of the lamp and the pale silver of the moon. Neither remained very long. Both quietly continued on. You found yourself watching the light instead of following your thoughts. It moved more slowly than thinking ever could. Perhaps that was why it felt so peaceful. Outside the workshop, the old linden released another leaf. It drifted through the air without haste. For one brief moment, it caught the moonlight. Then it settled among the lavender. No sound, no ceremony, only a leaf, finding the place where it wished to rest. Emile noticed it through the open doorway. His eyes followed it only until it reached the ground. He smiled almost invisibly. Then he looked away. Some things did not become more beautiful by being watched longer. The clocks continued. The cricket continued. The river continued. Even the silence seemed quietly alive. You took another slow breath. The scent of cedar had become softer now. Lavender lingered near the doorway. Fresh earth carried the coolness of the coming dawn. Far beyond the hills, the sky remained dark. Yet somewhere above the trees, one single star disappeared. Not because the morning had arrived, simply because a thin cloud had chosen, for a little while, to pass gently in front of it. Nothing hurried. Nothing waited. The night simply continued, patiently, allowing everything within it to become exactly what it already was. The night had grown cooler. Not suddenly. The warmth simply drifted away, little by little, until the air carried a softness that belonged only to late evenings. The workshop welcomed it without resistance. The open doorway remained just as it was, neither wider nor narrower. The cool air wandered across the floorboards. It lingered near the threshold, then continued quietly through the room. The warmth of the oil lamp met it halfway. Neither one disappeared. For a little while, they shared the same space. Emile noticed the change before anyone else. Not because he was watching for it, perhaps because evenings had taught him how to listen with more than his ears. He reached for a folded wool blanket resting on the back of a nearby chair. He did not unfold it. He simply laid it across the arm of the rocking chair. If someone wished for it later, it would already be there. Then he returned to the workbench. Nothing more needed to be done. Clara stood beside the open window. She rested her fingertips lightly on the wooden frame. The wood felt cooler now. The warmth that had gathered throughout the day had almost entirely faded. She smiled to herself, as though greeting an old friend who arrived quietly every evening. Outside, the lavender carried less fragrance than before. Now, the scent of damp grass rose more clearly from the garden. Somewhere beneath the herbs, the earth released the coolness it had been patiently gathering since sunset. You stepped onto the porch once again. The railing felt smooth beneath your hand, a little colder now. not uncomfortable, simply honest. The kind of coolness that asks for nothing and promises nothing, except that the night is gently continuing. Far across the meadow, a light appeared for a brief moment. Perhaps someone had opened a door. Perhaps a lantern had been lifted. A few quiet seconds later, the light disappeared again. No one wondered why. In Millhaven, not every light needed a story. The stars seemed brighter now, not because they had changed, because the air had become clearer. You noticed one reflected inside the rain barrel beside the garden gate. The surface of the water remained perfectly still. The reflected star trembled only when a faint breeze crossed above it. Then, it settled again. You stayed there a little longer, not counting the moments, not measuring the silence, only noticing how naturally warmth gave way to coolness, and how neither one seemed more welcome than the other. Inside, the clocks continued their patient rhythm. Outside, the river kept its endless course. Between them, the workshop held both the warmth of the day and the freshness of the coming night. For one quiet moment, it seemed possible that peace was not something that arrived. Perhaps it was something that had always been there, waiting patiently for everything else to become still enough to notice it. The night settled a little deeper over Millhaven. No one noticed the moment it happened. There was no line between earlier and later, only a quiet unfolding. The workshop remained open to the garden. The doorway framed the silver path outside, where moonlight rested gently upon the gravel. Not every stone reflected the light. Some remained pale. Others seemed almost luminous. Together, they formed a path that never asked to be followed, only noticed. The air had become cooler again. Not enough to change the evening, only enough to remind the wooden walls that another hour had quietly passed. The scent inside the workshop shifted once more. The cedar beams had grown softer. The lavender near the doorway had almost faded into the background. Now, it was the faint fragrance of old paper that gently filled the room. The books had warmed all day. Perhaps they, too, released something of themselves into the night. Clara walked toward the shelves. She did not choose a book. Instead, she rested one finger against the spine of a familiar volume. She left it there for a single breath, then continued walking. Some evenings, recognition was enough. Emile stood beside the workbench. His attention wandered to the small window above it. A tiny bead of moisture had formed on the glass. It caught the moonlight for only a moment. Then slowly, it began its quiet journey downward. Not straight. The grain of the old glass gently guided its path. Emile watched until the droplet disappeared into the wooden frame. Then he smiled, almost too faintly to notice. Outside, the river carried the same patient voice it had all evening. Yet now, the sound seemed rounder, as though the cool air had softened its edges. A single leaf drifted across the porch. The breeze lifted it once, lowered it again, then carried it beneath the rocking chair. There it came to rest. No one reached for it. It had found its evening. Far beyond the garden, A window glowed briefly between the trees. Warm amber. It remained visible only for a few breaths before a branch quietly crossed in front of it. The light disappeared. Not because it had gone out, only because the night had gently rearranged the view. You found yourself listening once more, not to the clocks, not to the river, but to the space that welcomed them both. The silence was no longer empty. It had texture now, like linen beneath your fingertips, like smooth wood warmed by many seasons, like cool stone resting beside flowing water. You drew one slow breath. The night answered with another. Not yours, not the village's. Simply, the quiet breathing of a place that had never needed to hurry. And for a little while longer, nothing wished to become different. Nothing wished to become more. Everything seemed quietly content to remain exactly where it belonged. The night continued, as though it had all the time in the world. Nothing hurried toward morning. Nothing lingered behind. The hours simply unfolded, one quiet breath after another. The workshop rested within its circle of warm light. Beyond the open doorway, the garden belonged to the moon. Between them, the threshold remained unchanged, neither inside nor outside, a place where both could quietly meet. A breeze wandered through the old linden. This time, it did not move every branch, only one. Its leaves whispered softly together, then settled once more. The rest of the tree remained perfectly still. You watched for a moment. It occurred to you that even the wind seemed to know it did not have to touch everything. Inside the workshop, the little oil lamp burned patiently. The glass chimney had gathered the faintest trace of warmth. A tiny moth rested nearby, without ever trying to reach the flame again. It had already found the place that suited it best. Emile remained near the workbench. His hand rested lightly on its worn surface. His fingers slowly followed one of the old scratches in the wood, not absent-mindedly, almost as though greeting something familiar. The mark had probably been there for years, perhaps longer. It needed no repair. It had simply become part of the table's story. Across the room, Clara paused beside the window. A single curtain cord had twisted gently in the evening breeze. She untangled it with one quiet movement. No more than that. The curtain settled naturally. The moonlight found its way inside once again. Nothing had been improved, only allowed to move freely. Outside, the river carried its endless conversation toward places no one could see. Its voice changed whenever it passed beneath the old wooden bridge. For a few breaths, the sound deepened, then became light again. The river never repeated itself, even when it followed the same path. Far above, a cloud drifted slowly across the stars. It was too thin to hide them. Instead, their light softened for a little while. The sky did not become darker, only gentler. You noticed the old rocking chair again. The moonlight reached one curved arm. The lamp touched the other. Between the two, The wood held both colors without choosing either. Warm amber, cool silver. For a little while, they belonged to the same chair. Somewhere beyond the garden, a gate closed quietly, not sharply, only the soft sound of wood meeting wood. No voices followed, no footsteps, just the comforting certainty that someone else had also found home for the night. You smiled without knowing why. Perhaps because Millhaven never felt empty. Even when no one could be seen, life continued quietly, behind softly lit windows, beneath old trees, along the patient river, and inside every clock that still kept faithful company with the sleeping village. You remained where you were, listening, breathing, watching the light travel slowly across the floor. It seemed to know the room by heart. Perhaps, after so many nights, it truly did. The night had settled gently into every corner of the workshop. Nothing felt newly placed. Nothing felt forgotten. Each object seemed to rest with the quiet confidence of something that had belonged there for a very long time. The old beams overhead held the warm glow of the lamp. Their grain caught the light differently than it had earlier, not because the lamp had changed, but because the night had. A faint breeze wandered through the open doorway. It found the hanging herbs first: lavender, rosemary, a few stems of sage. They swayed together, then slowly returned to stillness. Not all at once, each in its own time. Emile remained by the workbench. Without looking, he reached toward the small wooden drawer beside him. His hand stopped just before touching it. Then, almost instinctively, it moved a little farther to the left. There rested the polishing cloth he had been about to search for. He smiled to himself. The workshop had quietly taught his hands where to go. Across the room, Clara paused beside the rocking chair. She brushed away a single strand of wool that had caught on the blanket folded across its arm. The thread floated downward. For a moment, it shone in the moonlight, then disappeared against the wooden floor. She did not follow it. It had already found its place. Outside, the river carried on beneath the old bridge. Tonight, its voice was softer there. The water was a little higher than yesterday, only by a finger's width. Enough to change the sound, not enough to change the river. Beyond the garden gate, the narrow path lay empty. Its pale stones reflected scattered pieces of moonlight. Between them, small patches of moss had gathered over many quiet seasons. No one hurried to clear them away. They belonged to the path, just as surely as the stones themselves. You noticed something you had overlooked before. Near the doorway, one corner of the wooden threshold had become smooth with time. Thousands of quiet footsteps, returning home, leaving again, coming back once more. No one had planned that gentle curve. It had simply appeared, one evening after another, year after year. The workshop had remembered every step without keeping count. A slow breath moved through the room. Perhaps yours, perhaps the night's, perhaps both. The clocks continued their patient conversation. The moth remained asleep beneath its leaf. The stars rested above Millhaven. And And somewhere beyond the hills, another quiet evening was unfolding in another small home. The thought came gently, then drifted away. It did not need to stay. Some thoughts are kindest when they pass through us, like moonlight across an old wooden floor, never asking to be held, only asking to be noticed. For one peaceful moment, for a long while, no one crossed the room. Nothing needed to be moved, nothing asked to be finished. The workshop seemed perfectly content to remain exactly as it was. The oil lamp burned quietly beside the workbench. Its flame had grown smaller, not weaker, simply calmer. The glass around it carried a faint warmth. Tiny reflections drifted across its surface whenever the flame breathed. Outside, the moon continued its slow journey above the rooftops. Its light reached the old rain barrel beside the garden gate. The water inside had become perfectly still. For a brief moment, the moon rested there as well, not above the village, but within it. Then a single drop slipped from the edge of the roof. The surface trembled, only once. The reflected moon dissolved into quiet circles before patiently finding itself again. No one had seen the drop fall. The night had taken care of it on its own. Inside, Emile stood beside the shelves. He noticed that one of the small wooden boxes had been left slightly open. Without looking inside, he closed the lid with the gentlest touch, just enough for the wood to meet the wood. No sound followed. Across the room, Clara paused near the doorway. The blanket still rested over the arm of the rocking chair. She did not straighten it. It did not need straightening. Instead, she lightly brushed a speck of dust from the chair's curved back. It disappeared into the warm light. Nothing looked different afterward. Yet somehow, the room felt quietly cared for. Outside, a breeze wandered through the garden once more. It passed over the lavender, then through the rosemary. Finally, it reached the old linden. Only the highest leaves answered. The lower branches remained perfectly still, as though the tree itself had decided that only the top should speak tonight. You listened. The silence beneath those leaves felt deeper now. Not because fewer sounds remained, because each one had found exactly where it belonged. Far away, a farmhouse window slowly grew dark. Someone had turned down a lamp. Not suddenly. The light simply became smaller, until the night welcomed it home. You rested your hand against the weathered doorframe once again. Its wood carried the coolness of the evening now. Beneath your fingertips, one shallow groove curved gently across the grain. It was no larger than a leaf. Perhaps it had been made by a ring, or by a key, or by countless passing hands. It no longer mattered. The wood had accepted it years ago. The clocks continued. The river continued. The stars remained where they had always been. And quietly, without asking anyone's permission, the night continued caring for itself. You found comfort in that thought. Not because it explained anything, because it asked nothing of you. You did not have to hold the evening together. It already knew how to become whole. The workshop had become part of the night, not sheltered from it. not surrounded by it, simply included. The open doorway still welcomed the cool air. The lamp still offered its quiet circle of warmth. Neither reached very far, yet together they were enough. Outside, the garden had settled into its own gentle rhythm. The lavender no longer swayed with every passing breeze. Only the tallest stems answered now. The rest remained peacefully still, as though they had learned that not every whisper required a reply. The moon climbed a little farther west. Its light slipped across the porch. For a few quiet moments, it rested on the smooth curve of the rocking chair. Then, without hurry, it continued toward the old rain barrel. The chair did not seem emptier after the light had gone, only different. Emile noticed a small wooden pencil lying near the edge of the workbench. He picked it up, not to write. He simply turned it once in his fingers. The point had grown slightly dull. He reached for a tiny knife. With slow, practiced movements, he sharpened the pencil. The cedar curled away in thin ribbons. Each shaving landed softly on the cloth beneath his hands. When the point was finished, he brushed the shavings into his palm, then stepped outside. Beneath the linden, he scattered them quietly into the flower bed. Tomorrow, they would simply become part of the soil. He returned without a word. The sharpened pencil rested exactly where it had before, only ready now for whenever it might be needed. Across the room, Clara opened the window just another inch. A cooler breath of air entered. The curtain lifted gently. The hanging herbs answered with the faintest movement. Then everything settled once more. No adjustment seemed permanent here. Everything remained free to respond to the evening. You wandered slowly toward the bookshelf. On the lowest shelf, a small ceramic bowl held several acorns. Some still wore their tiny caps. Others had lost them long ago. You smiled. No label explained why they were there. None was needed. Some beautiful things never asked to be understood, only noticed. Outside, the river continued its quiet passage beneath the bridge. Its sound blended with the leaves, the distant cricket, the patient clocks, until none of them seemed separate anymore. They were simply the voice of Millhaven. You leaned lightly against the doorframe. The wood carried the coolness of the night. The air carried the warmth of the lamp. For one gentle breath, you stood exactly between them, neither choosing one nor leaving the other. The village asked nothing. The workshop asked nothing. Even the silence seemed completely at ease, with simply being silence. And little by little, without your noticing when it began, the feeling of being a visitor grew quieter than the ticking of the clocks. The night continued quietly over Millhaven. No one seemed to notice the passing of another hour. There was no reason to. The workshop had grown familiar with the darkness. The darkness, equally familiar with the workshop. The clocks carried on with their patient rhythm. Some ticked a little faster, others slower. None tried to correct the others. The room seemed perfectly comfortable, with every clock keeping its own time. Outside, a thin mist had begun to gather above the meadow. It rested only a little higher than the grass, not hiding the ground, simply softening its edges. The old garden path was still visible, though now its pale stones appeared to emerge gently from the mist, one after another, like quiet memories, arriving without being called. You stood for a while watching the path, not wondering where it led, only appreciating that it remained there, whether anyone walked upon it or not. Emile folded the linen cloth resting on the workbench. Once, then once again. Its edges met naturally. He placed it beside the polished wooden box, not perfectly aligned, perfectly comfortable. He noticed a tiny curl of cedar shaving that had escaped his hand earlier. It rested near the corner of the table. He picked it up, held it for a brief moment, then carried it outside. The shaving disappeared quietly into the flower bed beneath the window. Nothing had been cleaned away, only returned. Clara opened the small cupboard beneath the shelves. Inside stood several empty glass jars. She chose one, held it toward the lamp. The warm light passed through the old glass. Tiny air bubbles hidden inside caught the glow for just a moment. She smiled softly, then returned the jar to its place. It had needed nothing. Perhaps neither had she. The breeze wandered through the doorway once more. This time, it carried the distant scent of pine from the hills beyond the village. It lingered only for a breath. Then the familiar fragrance of lavender quietly returned. Nothing insisted on staying. Everything trusted its turn. A single cloud crossed before the moon. The workshop dimmed for a few peaceful seconds. The brass clocks no longer shimmered. The polished wood became deeper in color. The shadows grew softer. Then, just as gently, the cloud drifted onward. The silver light returned. Nothing celebrated its arrival. Nothing had mourned its absence. The night accepted both with equal grace. Far away, a dog barked once. The sound echoed faintly across the fields, then dissolved into the distance. The village remained undisturbed. One small sound was simply allowed to become part of the evening. You listened, not for something new, not for something familiar, only for whatever the night quietly chose to offer next. And little by little, you began to understand that Millhaven never tried to create peace. It simply never interrupted it. The night had become wonderfully unhurried. The workshop no longer felt like a room where work had been done. It felt like a room where the evening had chosen to stay. The oil lamp still burned beside the workbench. Its flame had settled into a steady glow, small enough that shadows could exist beside it, bright enough that nothing needed to disappear. Outside, the mist had wandered farther into the garden. It gathered softly around the lower stems of the lavender. The flowers themselves remained clear beneath the moon. Only the earth beneath them had become quieter. A single droplet rested on the tip of one lavender stem. For a long time, it remained exactly where it was. Then, almost without moving, it slipped onto the leaf below. Another quiet beginning, not an ending. Emile noticed the old window latch. It had drifted slightly open with the cool night air. He placed 2 fingers against it, not to close it, only to keep it from tapping gently against the frame whenever the breeze returned. The window remained open. The night remained welcome. Only the small, unnecessary sound had disappeared. He smiled faintly, then walked away. Clara stood near the shelves once more. One pressed fern had slipped just a little from between the pages of a notebook. She eased it back inside, carefully enough that the stem remained straight. The notebook closed without a sound. Nothing had been rescued. Nothing had been repaired. Only quietly cared for. Beyond the garden, the river flowed beneath the old bridge. The water carried a single fallen leaf. It disappeared beneath the wooden beams. For a moment, you wondered where it had gone. Then it emerged on the other side, still floating, still following the same patient current. The bridge had not interrupted its journey. It had simply become part of it. Far across the meadow, a narrow footpath disappeared into the mist. You could no longer see where it ended, only where it began. Strangely, that felt enough. Not every path needed to reveal its destination. Some only needed to remind you that someone had walked there before. The breeze returned once more. This time, it carried no fragrance at all, only cool air, clear, quiet, almost transparent. You breathed it in slowly. Nothing seemed added to the night. Nothing seemed missing. The old rocking chair remained still. The clocks remained faithful. The river continued. The stars waited beyond the drifting clouds. And somewhere, without asking to be noticed, Millhaven quietly continued becoming itself. You stood for another peaceful moment, no longer expecting the evening to offer something new, simply grateful that it never hurried away from what was already here. The night had settled so completely over Millhaven that it no longer felt like something passing through. It felt as though it had always belonged here. The workshop remained open. The lamp still burned. The river still moved beyond the trees. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything felt quieter than before. Outside, the mist had spread across the meadow. It no longer rested only near the ground. It drifted gently between the trunks of the old lindens, softening their outlines without hiding them. The trees did not disappear. They simply became gentler to look at. The moon continued its patient journey. Its light slipped across the roof of the workshop, then found the old weather vane above it. For a few quiet moments, the worn metal caught a pale silver glow. It turned ever so slightly in the breeze, not enough to point somewhere new, only enough to greet the changing wind. Below, the rain barrel reflected a different piece of the sky now. A single cloud passed slowly across the water. The reflection moved first. The cloud itself followed later. You smiled. The night always seemed to offer two ways of seeing the same thing. Inside, Emile lifted the small wooden pencil once more. He wrote only a single word on a blank label. Nothing more. He looked at it for a moment, then placed the label inside an empty drawer. The pencil returned quietly to the table. Some words did not need to be used tonight. Across the room, Clara noticed that the blanket had slipped slightly from the rocking chair. She lifted one corner, folded it back into place. The fabric settled with a quiet weight. It seemed warmer simply because someone had cared enough to touch it gently. Outside, a single apple fell somewhere beyond the garden wall. The sound was soft, almost round. It landed unseen among the grass. No one went to look. Morning would find it. The night had already accepted it. The clocks continued their faithful rhythm. The bridge welcomed the river. The meadow welcomed the mist. The workshop welcomed the cool air. Nothing resisted what quietly belonged. You rested once more beneath the doorway. Behind you, warm cedar. Before you, cool earth. Above, a sky that had forgotten any need to hurry toward dawn. The village asked nothing. The night explained nothing. Even the silence seemed free from the need to become meaningful. It simply existed. Steady, patient, complete. You drew another slow breath. It felt strangely familiar now, as though your breathing had not learned the rhythm of Millhaven. Perhaps it had only remembered one it had known long ago. And somewhere, beyond the river, beyond the sleeping fields, beyond the last quiet light still glowing in a distant window, the night continued. Not waiting, not leaving, simply making room for every quiet thing that wished to belong. The night no longer felt unfamiliar, not because you had learned its paths, nor because you knew the names of those who lived here. It was something quieter than that. The sounds no longer asked for your attention. They simply remained nearby. The clocks continued their patient rhythm. The river continued beyond the bridge. The breeze wandered where it pleased. And somehow, your thoughts no longer followed each one. They rested among them. The workshop carried the gentle scent of cedar. The fragrance had settled into the wood over many years. It did not greet the evening. It simply belonged to it. A faint line of moonlight reached the edge of the workbench once again. Tonight, it arrived a little later, a little farther to the left, without anyone noticing the exact moment. Emile noticed the change only when the light reached the small brass handle of an old drawer. It glowed softly for a breath. He looked at it, then quietly continued exactly as before. Some things did not become more meaningful simply because they had been noticed. Clara stepped outside. She paused beside the rain barrel. The water had grown perfectly still again. The reflection of the moon rested there, unbroken. She leaned just enough to look into it, not at herself, only at the light floating upon the water. After a few quiet breaths, she straightened again. The moon remained behind, exactly where it had always been. A single cricket had moved closer to the porch. Its song sounded warmer here, perhaps because the wooden walls returned a little of the day's warmth to the night. Perhaps because the garden had grown quieter. No one could have said. No one needed to. Far beyond the meadow, another breeze crossed the hills. This one carried the scent of pine once more, only lightly, as though the forest wished simply to remind the village that it was still there. The old rocking chair rested where it always had. A tiny leaf had settled upon its seat, no larger than a thumbnail. Its stem pointed toward the doorway. Its pale surface caught a little moonlight. For a while, it became part of the chair. Not decoration, not interruption. Simply another quiet thing, sharing the same evening. You found yourself smiling, not because anything delightful had happened, only because nothing had asked the night to become different. Inside, the clocks kept their faithful company. Outside, the mist continued its slow conversation with the meadow. Above, the stars waited patiently beyond the drifting clouds. And somewhere between all of them, you noticed something that could hardly be named. The village no longer felt like a place you were visiting, nor did it feel like a place that belonged to you. It felt, for one peaceful moment, like a place that was simply willing to let you be there. Nothing more, nothing less. The night continued. The lamp continued. The river continued. And quietly, without asking for gratitude, Millhaven continued making room for one more peaceful breath. The night moved quietly onward, not toward anything, simply onward. The workshop had grown almost weightless in the darkness. The warm light of the lamp no longer stood apart from the moon. Together, they had learned to share the room. Outside, the mist rested low across the meadow. Its edges shifted so slowly that it seemed less like movement and more like breathing. The old linden stood patiently above it. Its branches reached into the clear sky. Its roots disappeared beneath the quiet earth. Neither seemed more important than the other. Both simply belonged to the tree. Emile opened the small window another fraction, barely enough for anyone to notice. The fresh air entered without haste. It wandered through the room, across the clocks, across the books, across the folded blanket. Nothing stirred very much, only enough to remind the workshop that the night was still outside. Near the windowsill, a tiny feather rested where the breeze had left it earlier. For one gentle moment, it lifted, turned once in the air, then settled again. Not farther away, not closer, simply a little differently than before. Clara noticed. She did not reach for it. The feather had already found another place to rest. The room accepted that without question. You stepped quietly onto the porch. The cool boards beneath your feet carried a trace of moisture now. Not enough to feel damp, only enough to tell you that the night had been here for a long while. Beyond the garden, the river continued beneath the bridge. Tonight, its voice seemed almost hidden beneath the mist. Not quieter, only farther away, as though distance itself had become softer. A faint breeze crossed the meadow. The mist parted around the old footpath. For only a few breaths, the pale stones appeared again. Then the mist closed gently behind them. The path had not vanished. It had simply become patient once more. Inside, one of the oldest clocks gave a quiet wooden not the striking of an hour, only the gentle sound of timber settling into itself. Emile looked up. His eyes rested on the clock for a moment. Then he nodded almost imperceptibly. The sound belonged. Nothing more was needed. The lamp burned on. The river flowed on. The mist drifted. The stars remained hidden and revealed, as the clouds quietly wandered across the sky. You found yourself no longer waiting for the night to offer another beautiful moment. Every ordinary moment had quietly become beautiful enough. For a while, you simply stood there, not watching, not listening, not thinking, only sharing the same unhurried evening with a village that had never once asked you to become anyone other than the quiet traveler who had arrived at its door. The night remained quietly awake, not alert, not asleep, simply present. The workshop rested beneath the soft glow of the lamp. Outside, the mist continued its slow conversation with the meadow. Neither one seemed eager to move on. A gentle breeze found the open doorway once again. This time, it carried no fragrance, only cool, clear air. It crossed the threshold, past the rocking chair, moved between the clocks, then drifted quietly out through the small window above the workbench. For a little while, the workshop seemed to breathe. Emile rested one hand upon the old table. His fingers remained still. Only the sleeve of his sweater shifted slightly as the cool air passed by. He did not notice it. Or perhaps he had noticed such things so many evenings before that they had become part of simply being there. Clara stood beside the shelves. One of the books leaned ever so slightly against another. Not enough to fall, not enough to seem untidy. She looked at it, smiled almost invisibly, and left it exactly as it was. Some balances already know how to keep themselves. Outside, a small owl glided silently between two old lindens. You heard nothing, only a brief change in the moonlight as its wings crossed the silver path. A moment later, the light returned. The village never seemed concerned by such small arrivals and departures. They belonged to the evening, just as naturally as the stars. The rain barrel beside the garden gate reflected only a small corner of the sky now. A cloud had quietly taken the moon elsewhere. The water remained perfectly still. It never seemed disappointed when there was less to reflect. The clocks continued. One tick, another, a pause, then another gentle rhythm joining the first. No clock asked to be the loudest. No rhythm asked to lead. The room welcomed them all. You found yourself looking toward the open doorway once more. The gravel path had almost disappeared into the mist. Only its nearest stones remained visible. The rest simply continued beyond what your eyes could reach. And somehow, that felt comforting. Not every part of the journey needed to be seen to know it was still there. A single leaf turned over on the porch, not because anyone touched it, only because the breeze had returned. Its pale underside caught the moonlight for a heartbeat. Then the leaf became still again. The knight noticed, without watching. The workshop listened, without waiting. The village rested, without trying. And little by little, you discovered that peace was becoming less like a feeling and more like the quiet way everything here allowed everything else to exist. The night carried on without announcing itself. Nothing marked the passing of another hour. No bell, no distant voice. Only the slow, faithful rhythm of things that had no need to hurry. The workshop had become quieter than silence, not because there was less to hear, because nothing wished to stand apart from anything else. The clocks continued. The river continued. The breeze wandered where it pleased. Each sound found its place and remained there without asking to be noticed. A narrow ribbon of moonlight rested across the windowsill. It reached the little rosemary plant first. Then, little by little, it climbed the clay pot. By the time it touched the highest leaves, the lower ones had already returned to shadow. The light never stayed. It simply kept its quiet promise to visit everything in time. Emile noticed a small wooden stool near the wall. One leg rested on an uneven floorboard. It rocked almost imperceptibly. He walked toward it, placed one hand lightly upon the seat, turned it no more than the width of a thumb. The stool became still. He left it exactly there. Nothing looked different, only quieter. Clara paused beside the open doorway. A tiny feather had drifted onto the threshold sometime during the evening. She looked at it for a breath, then stepped over it, carefully. Not because it was fragile, because it already belonged where it was. Beyond the porch, the mist had begun to lift from the meadow. Not all at once. Small clearings appeared here and there. A patch of grass, a pale stone, the curve of the narrow path. Then the mist returned, softly folding itself around them again. It was less like watching weather, and more like watching someone breathe beneath a blanket. The river carried the same quiet voice. Yet every now and then, one gentle ripple caught the moonlight. It brightened for only a heartbeat, then became water again. Nothing tried to remain remarkable. The rocking chair stood motionless. Its blanket had settled into gentle folds. One corner hung a little lower than before. No one reached to straighten it. The fabric seemed perfectly content to rest in its own shape. You noticed your breathing once again, not because you were listening for it, because it no longer felt separate from the room. For a little while, the workshop, the garden, the river, and your quiet breath seemed to share the same patient evening. Far away, a single window lost its light. Another remained. The village changed, without ever becoming different. You stayed where you were. No thought asked to be finished. No memory asked to be held. The night seemed to understand that some beautiful things become even gentler when they are allowed to remain slightly unfinished. The night continued without effort. Nothing seemed to begin. Nothing seemed to end. The hours simply gathered, one beside another, like smooth stones resting along the riverbank. The workshop welcomed another quiet breath of cool air. It entered through the open doorway, crossed the wooden floor, brushed gently past the rocking chair, then found its way toward the little window above the workbench. The curtain moved only once. The hanging herbs answered with the faintest sway. Then stillness returned, not because the breeze had left, because it had already become part of the room. Outside, the moon climbed a little farther. Its light reached the old apple tree beyond the garden wall. One branch glowed softly. Another remained in shadow. Neither seemed more beautiful than the other. Together, they completed the tree. Emile noticed a tiny curl of wood resting near the edge of the workbench. Perhaps it had fallen there while sharpening the pencil earlier. He lifted it between his fingers. For a moment, he simply looked at it. The cedar still carried its quiet fragrance. He opened the door, placed the shaving gently beneath the rosemary, then returned inside. Nothing had been thrown away, only returned to another part of the same evening. Clara crossed slowly to the bookshelf. A small glass bottle stood beside the books. Inside, a single dried lavender stem rested against the clear glass. She turned the bottle ever so slightly, just enough for the moonlight to pass through it. A pale violet shadow appeared upon the shelf. It remained there, only until a cloud drifted gently across the moon. Then the color quietly faded. The bottle stayed. The lavender stayed. Only the light had continued its journey. Far beyond the meadow, the river carried another leaf beneath the old bridge. This one disappeared from sight for a little longer. When it emerged again, it turned slowly once upon the water, then continued downstream. Nothing had delayed it. The bridge had simply shared part of its journey. The clocks continued. The mist wandered patiently between the trees. Some stars appeared. Others quietly withdrew behind passing clouds. The village accepted each small change without asking it to last. You leaned lightly against the doorway. The wood felt cooler than before. The air felt softer. Somewhere nearby, a cricket paused for several breaths, then began again. Its song had not been broken, only allowed to rest. You smiled. It occurred to you that perhaps quiet places do not become peaceful because nothing changes. Perhaps they become peaceful because nothing is asked to remain exactly as it is. The lamp continued to glow. The river continued to flow. The breeze continued to wander. And somewhere between all those gentle movements, the night quietly carried each one a little farther, without ever leaving anything behind. The night had settled so gently that even waiting seemed to have fallen asleep. Nothing was about to happen. Nothing needed to. The workshop rested exactly as it had a few quiet moments before. The lamp glowed softly beside the workbench. Its light no longer seemed to reach outward. It simply remained where it was, comfortable enough to let the darkness keep the rest. Outside, the mist wandered slowly across the meadow. It no longer drifted in visible waves. It seemed to breathe. expanding almost imperceptibly, then gathering itself again. The old footpath appeared, then quietly disappeared, without ever truly leaving. Emile stood beside the open doorway. His hands rested loosely in the pockets of his sweater. He watched nothing in particular. Not the garden, not the sky, not even the river beyond the trees. He simply stood where the warm light ended and the cool night began. After a while, he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The old floorboard answered with the gentlest creak. He smiled almost without realizing it. Some sounds only belong to places that have known you for a long time. Across the room, Clara reached for the small ceramic cup resting on the shelf. It was empty. She looked inside anyway, then placed it back exactly where she had found it. The cup had not been forgotten. It simply had nothing more to offer tonight. A breeze wandered through the doorway. It carried the faint scent of damp earth, a little cedar, a little lavender, and something else, something too quiet to be named. Perhaps the coolness that gathers just before midnight. The hanging herbs swayed together, not in perfect harmony. One stem moved first, another followed, a third remained still. Nothing corrected the difference. The room welcomed every small rhythm. Beyond the garden wall, the river continued beneath the bridge. For one brief moment, the water caught the reflection of a single star. Then a passing ripple carried it away. The star remained above. The river continued below. Neither had lost anything. You noticed how naturally your eyes moved now. From the doorway to the trees, from the trees to the lamp, from the lamp to the quiet floorboards. Nothing called for your attention. Your attention simply wandered, the way moonlight wandered through the workshop, without purpose, without urgency. Near the rocking chair, the folded blanket had settled into deeper, softer folds. No one had touched it. The fabric had simply relaxed beneath its own weight. It occurred to you that perhaps places could exhale too. Not loudly, not all at once, only through tiny changes that no one could ever point to. The clocks continued their faithful rhythm. The river continued its patient journey. The breeze arrived and quietly departed again. Nothing announced itself. Nothing asked to be remembered. The night seemed completely at peace, with being exactly one ordinary night among countless others. And somehow, that made it unforgettable. The night continued, without asking the hours to slow down. They already had. The workshop rested within its quiet circle of light. The doorway remained open. The garden remained patient. Beyond the trees, the river kept its steady course beneath the old bridge. Nothing seemed eager to become tomorrow. The lamp burned with the same gentle flame. Its light rested upon the workbench, then wandered softly across the wooden floor. A narrow shadow stretched beneath the rocking chair. It lingered there for a while, before quietly changing shape as the moon continued its patient climb. No one noticed the exact moment it changed. There was no need to. Emile walked toward the shelf where several small glass jars stood. He lifted one. Inside, there was nothing at all. He held it near the lamp. The empty glass caught the warm light for a moment. Then he placed it back beside the others. The jar had offered nothing, yet somehow it had not seemed empty. Across the room, Clara noticed a single lavender petal resting on the windowsill. The breeze touched it lightly. It slid only the width of a fingertip, then stopped. She smiled, not because it had moved, because it had not needed to move any farther. Outside, the mist had become thinner now. The pale stones of the garden path appeared more clearly. Drops of dew rested quietly between them. Each reflected a different piece of the sky. None tried to reflect the whole of it. Far beyond the meadow, the old windmill stood perfectly still. Its wooden sails had not turned for hours. Yet somehow, it never seemed forgotten. It belonged to the night, even in stillness. A quiet breeze returned. This time, it carried the scent of pine, followed by damp grass, and finally, the familiar fragrance of cedar drifting from the workshop itself. One scent never replaced another. They simply arrived, shared the same air, and gently moved on. The clocks continued. One finished its quiet tick, just as another began. The room never became silent, nor did it become busy. It simply remained full of small continuations. You rested your hand upon the weathered doorframe once more. The wood felt cooler than before. Its smooth surface carried the memory of countless evenings, not as stories, as touch. Above, another cloud crossed the moon. The garden softened, the shadows deepened. Then, without anyone waiting for it, the moonlight quietly returned, exactly as before. Yet somehow, never exactly the same. You watched the light arrive. You watched it leave. Neither moment seemed more important than the other. Perhaps that was why both felt so peaceful. For a long while, nothing tried to remain. Nothing seemed afraid of passing. And because of that, everything felt wonderfully free to return again. The night had become wonderfully certain of itself. There was nothing left to arrange, nothing left to prepare. The workshop rested exactly as the evening had shaped it. The lamp glowed quietly beside the workbench. Its warm circle of light reached the familiar places: the edge of the table, the old rocking chair, the weathered doorway. It reached no farther than it needed to. Outside, the moon had climbed beyond the tallest branches of the linden. Its silver light now fell more directly across the garden. The shadows grew shorter, not because they were leaving, only because the light had chosen another path. The mist drifted gently across the meadow. It never covered everything. It never uncovered everything. It seemed content to leave part of the landscape visible and part of it quietly imagined. Emile noticed a tiny knot in the grain of the workbench. His thumb rested upon it for a moment. The wood curved gently around that small imperfection. Years ago, someone could have sanded it away. No one had. The table had learned to grow around it instead. He smiled softly, then withdrew his hand. Across the room, Clara paused beside the window. A dried lavender stem leaned ever so slightly inside its glass bottle. She did not straighten it. The gentle curve seemed to belong to the stem, as naturally as the fragrance that still lingered around it. Outside, a breeze passed through the rosemary. Only the upper leaves answered. The lower ones remained still. Neither movement nor stillness seemed more complete than the other. Far beyond the meadow, the old bridge carried no footsteps tonight. Still, the river passed beneath it with the same patient voice. The bridge did not wait to be crossed. The river did not wait to be seen. Each quietly continued the life it already knew. The clocks breathed their familiar rhythm, not one identical to another, yet together they never sounded uncertain. You noticed the light upon the floor once again. Earlier, it had rested near the doorway. Now, without anyone seeing it move, it had reached the foot of the rocking chair. The room had changed. Quietly enough that it almost felt as though the room itself had turned instead of the moon. You stood without speaking, without searching for another beautiful thought. The evening had already given enough. Sometimes, the kindest thing a quiet place can do is stop trying to become more beautiful than it already is. A single leaf loosened itself from the old linden. It did not fall quickly. The cool air carried it in a slow circle, once above the path, once beside the porch, then gently onto the grass. No wind returned to lift it again. The leaf had arrived. The night made no announcement. It simply welcomed another quiet thing into its endless patience. The night rested gently upon Millhaven. It no longer felt like an hour or a moment. It simply felt like itself. The workshop remained quietly awake. The lamp still offered its warm, familiar light. The doorway remained open. The garden remained patient. Nothing seemed to expect the next minute to be different from the last. Outside, dew had gathered along the wooden railing of the porch. Each tiny drop rested exactly where it had formed. None hurried toward the ground. One reflected the lamp. Another reflected the moon. A third reflected only darkness. Each was complete. Emile stepped onto the porch, not to look for anything, only to feel the cool night air. He rested one hand upon the railing. His fingertips stopped beside one of the dewdrops. He did not touch it. The drop remained exactly where it was. Some quiet things were already perfectly held. Behind him, the workshop continued breathing in its familiar rhythm. A clock, the breeze, the soft settling of old timber. Nothing announced itself. Everything quietly belonged. Clara walked toward the bookshelf once again. A narrow ribbon marked her place inside a small notebook. She did not open it. Instead, she straightened the ribbon where it rested between the pages. The notebook remained closed. Some evenings, even unfinished thoughts deserve uninterrupted sleep. Outside, the mist lifted another little while. The footpath appeared once more. Its pale stones carried tiny pools of moonlight. Between them, the earth remained dark and cool. Neither asked to resemble the other. Far away, a small bird shifted in its sleep. Only once. Then the branches became still again. The village seemed to notice, without ever looking. You found yourself listening to the quiet spaces again, not because they were empty, because they had become familiar. A place between one sound and the next, where nothing was missing. The lamp glowed. The dew remained. The river continued. And the night, without asking to be remembered, quietly became unforgettable. The night had reached that gentle hour when even the smallest sounds seemed to arrive more softly. The workshop stood exactly as before, yet somehow it felt even more welcoming. Not because anything had changed, because nothing had needed to. The lamp's flame had grown lower. Its light rested close to the table now. The corners of the room quietly belonged to the moon. Neither light tried to reach farther. Each trusted the other. Emile noticed the old kettle resting on the stove. He lifted the lid slightly, only to see whether a little warmth still remained inside. It did. He smiled, closed the lid again. The warmth would stay a little longer. That was enough. Across the room, Clara paused beside the open window. A single ivy leaf had reached across the sill from outside. Its edge moved gently in the breeze. She brushed it lightly with the back of her fingers, not to move it, only to greet it. The leaf continued swaying after her hand was gone. Outside, the river flowed beneath the bridge with the same patient voice. The bridge asked nothing of the river. The river asked nothing of the bridge. Still, they had spent countless nights together. Perhaps companionship sometimes asks for nothing more than quietly remaining nearby. The stars appeared again as the clouds drifted eastward. One by one, they returned to the sky. Not brighter than before, simply visible again. You noticed the worn stone beside the porch step. Generations of careful footsteps had rounded its edges. Rain had smoothed it. Winter had cooled it. Summer had warmed it. Tonight, it simply rested beneath the moon, without asking anyone to remember how it had become so gentle. The breeze wandered through the doorway once more. It carried cedar, lavender, cool earth, and, just for a breath, the faint sweetness of ripening apples beyond the garden wall. The scents met, shared the same air, then quietly continued on their separate journeys. You stood without moving. There was nothing left to wait for, nothing left to understand. Only another peaceful breath inside another peaceful night. The workshop remained. The garden remained. The river remained. The stars remained. Not because they refused to change, because they had never needed to become anything else. For a little while longer, the whole village seemed to rest inside a single quiet promise. Whatever tomorrow brings, this night has already been enough. The night had become so familiar that it no longer seemed to arrive. It simply continued. The workshop rested quietly beneath the lamp. Its light had grown softer now, not dimmer, only gentler. The cedar shelves gathered the warm glow without reflecting very much of it back. Old wood rarely hurried to answer light. It preferred to keep a little for itself. Outside, the meadow had almost disappeared beneath the silver mist. Only the tops of the grasses remained visible. They swayed so lightly that it seemed the mist itself might be breathing. A breeze wandered through the open doorway. It carried the coolness of the hills. As it crossed the room, the pages of an open notebook lifted ever so slightly. Only one page turned. Not because anyone had wished to read farther, only because the evening had quietly reached the next page. Emile noticed. He rested his hand upon the notebook for a moment, not to stop the breeze, only to let the page settle where it had chosen to rest. Then he withdrew his hand. The notebook remained open, exactly there. Across the room, Clara paused beside the old kettle. A little warmth still lingered in the metal. She wrapped both hands around it, not to warm herself, simply because warmth, like kindness, sometimes remains long after it has been given. Outside, a single branch bowed beneath the weight of dew. When one drop finally slipped away, the branch rose again, so gently that the movement almost belonged to the mist itself. Nothing had been lost. The branch had only become lighter. The clocks continued their quiet company, one steady rhythm, then another. Between them, small spaces of silence, no larger than a breath. Yet somehow, they made every sound easier to hear. You stepped onto the porch. The night air rested lightly upon your face. It felt cooler than before, but not colder, only deeper. Far beyond the fields, the outline of the hills had nearly dissolved into the sky. You could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. It did not matter. Some boundaries grow gentler in the dark. The lamp glowed behind you. The moon rested before you. Neither asked you to choose between them. For a while, you simply stood where both could reach you, and that seemed to be enough. The evening continued with the quiet confidence of an old friend. It never asked whether you wished to stay. It simply left room for you if you did. The workshop had settled even deeper into its silence. The rocking chair remained exactly where it had always been. The blanket still rested across its arm. One fold had softened beneath its own weight. Another caught a narrow ribbon of moonlight. Together, they made the fabric seem almost alive. Emile crossed the room without hurry. As he passed the workbench, his sleeve brushed lightly against the wooden edge. A faint whisper of cloth against timber. Then nothing. Some sounds seemed too gentle even to become echoes. Clara opened the door just a little farther, not because the room needed more air, because the garden had something quiet to offer. The scent arrived first, damp earth, then rosemary, then, very faintly, the sweetness of wild jasmine climbing an old fence somewhere beyond the orchard. It stayed only for a breath, then the breeze carried it onward. Nothing in the garden tried to keep its fragrance. It trusted the wind to know where it belonged next. A cloud wandered across the moon. The silver light faded from the porch. The warm light from the lamp quietly filled the space it left behind. Neither hurried to replace the other. The night understood that even light could take turns. Beyond the meadow, the river continued beneath the bridge. A small ripple reached one of the old wooden posts. It touched it gently, then continued downstream. The post did not hold the water. The water did not avoid the post. For one brief moment, they simply shared the same current. You listened again. Not for birds, not for wind, not even for the clocks. You listened for the room itself. The old beams, the resting chairs, the quiet glass, the sleeping books. It seemed impossible to say where the house ended and the night began. Perhaps, after enough peaceful evenings, they had quietly learned to belong to one another. You drew another slow breath. Nothing asked to remain. Nothing feared becoming tomorrow. The workshop, the garden, the river, the stars. Each continued in its own patient way. And somewhere between them all, the night carried one gentle certainty that needed no words at all. It was enough that everything was still here. The night had settled into a rhythm so quiet that even time seemed content to walk more slowly. The workshop remained exactly as it had been. The lamp glowed beside the workbench. The doorway welcomed the garden. The garden welcomed the moon. Nothing seemed separate anymore. A soft breeze entered through the open door. It crossed the room without disturbing a single page upon the table. Only the flame noticed. It leaned gently for a breath, then stood upright again. Not because the breeze had gone, because both had quietly made room for each other. Emil rested his hands upon the edge of the workbench. His fingertips found the smooth places first, then the rougher grain. Neither felt more familiar. The table had kept both. Outside, the old apple tree stood quietly beyond the wall. One apple still clung to the highest branch. Another had already found the grass below. Neither seemed early. Neither seemed late. The tree had never hurried either of them. Clara stepped slowly across the porch. A tiny snail had begun crossing one of the wooden boards. Its silver trail caught the moonlight for only a moment. She paused, not because the snail was in her way, because she preferred not to become part of its journey. The snail continued. The porch remained silent. The night carried them both. Far beyond the meadow, the river touched the rounded stones beneath the bridge. Not every stone made a sound. Some simply welcomed the water and let it continue. You listened, noticing how naturally the river accepted every bend. It never tried to straighten its path. Perhaps that was why it reached so far. The clocks continued. Their gentle rhythms no longer sounded like separate voices. Together, they had become something quieter, almost like the slow breathing of the house itself. A cloud drifted across the stars. The garden softened. The mist brightened. Then everything quietly returned. No one seemed relieved. Nothing had truly gone away. You rested one hand against the old cedar door frame. The wood felt cooler than before. Its quiet grain rested beneath your fingertips. Years had polished only the places that had been touched. The rest remained exactly as it had always been. Neither was more beautiful. Each simply told a different part of the same evening. For another peaceful while, nothing stood in the way of anything else. The light, the breeze, the river, the silence. Each quietly continued, making room for the others to do the same. The night had grown wonderfully light. Not brighter, lighter, as though it had quietly set something down. The workshop seemed to feel it too. The old beams no longer held the warmth of the day alone. Now they carried the cool breath of the night as well. Neither one replaced the other. Both remained. The lamp burned lower. Its amber light rested close to the table. Moonlight reached farther across the floor. For a little while, both lights met near the rocking chair. Neither tried to become stronger. They simply shared the same quiet space. Emile noticed a tiny crack in one of the old clay flower pots resting by the window. His thumb followed its fine line, not to measure it, only to know it was there. He smiled softly. The pot had carried herbs through many seasons. The small crack had changed nothing that truly mattered. He left it exactly as it was. Outside, the breeze wandered through the rosemary. Its fragrance rose gently into the cool air. A moment later, it met the scent of damp cedar drifting from the workshop. For one quiet breath, they became impossible to separate. Then the wind carried each onward again. Near the garden gate, a single drop of dew slipped from one blade of grass onto another. The first blade rose a little lighter. The second bowed ever so slightly. Nothing had been lost. The weight had only changed places. Far across the meadow, a fox paused beside the edge of the mist. It stood perfectly still. Only its ears moved once. Then it continued quietly into the silver grass. The village did not react. The night had already made room for every living thing. Inside, Clara gently closed the notebook that had remained open all evening. She did not fasten it. She simply rested her hand upon its cover for one calm breath. Then she let it be. Some pages were already complete enough for tonight. The clocks breathed. The river wandered. The stars appeared, disappeared, then appeared once more between slow-moving clouds. Nothing insisted on being seen all the time. Perhaps that was another quiet kindness of the night. You remained where you were, not searching for another beautiful thought, only listening to everything that had no wish to become more than it already was. And somewhere, without anyone deciding when, the evening became one quiet whole, so complete that nothing needed to be added, and nothing needed to be taken away. The night no longer seemed to measure itself in hours. It measured itself differently. In the slow turning of moonlight across old wood, in the quiet settling of dew upon the garden, in the patient breathing of a house that had nothing left to prove. The workshop welcomed another peaceful silence. It did not feel empty. It felt complete. The oil lamp burned lower now. Its flame had become smaller than before. Yet the room seemed no darker. Moonlight had quietly accepted a little more of the evening. Neither light replaced the other. They simply adjusted, the way old friends make room without speaking. Emile stood beside the workbench. A small wooden ruler rested there. He picked it up, not to measure anything. He turned it once in his hand. The numbers carved into the wood had softened over many years. Some were almost invisible now. Still, the ruler had never forgotten how long an inch was. He smiled gently. Some things remain true, even after they are no longer easy to read. Outside, the old pear tree stood almost motionless. Only its highest leaves answered the breeze. Lower branches rested quietly beneath the moon. One pear hung close to the trunk, another near the outer branches. Neither seemed to envy the other. Each simply ripened where it had grown. Clara stepped into the garden. Her footsteps barely disturbed the gravel. She stopped beside the rosemary. A single bee slept beneath one small blossom, its wings folded neatly against its body. She leaned a little closer, then quietly stepped back. The flower had already become a safe place for the night. Nothing needed to be added. Beyond the meadow, mist drifted across the fields once again. It never seemed to arrive from anywhere, nor disappear toward anywhere else. It simply belonged, wherever the evening welcomed it. The river carried another quiet reflection of the moon. A gentle ripple passed. The reflection bent, then found itself again. The moon had never been lost. Only the water had continued moving. You noticed how slowly your eyes wandered now, from the doorway to the old pear tree, from the tree to the sleeping bee, from the bee back to the lamp. There was no reason for the journey. It happened, the way leaves follow the breeze, without deciding, without resisting. The clocks continued, the breeze returned, the lamp remained. And somewhere inside the quiet rhythm of the village, time itself seemed to have stopped counting and simply begun accompanying the night. The village rested beneath a sky that seemed wider than before, not because it had changed, because the night had become clearer. The stars appeared one by one between slow-moving clouds. None asked to shine brighter. Each quietly accepted the place the sky had given it. The workshop remained warm. Outside, the garden remained cool. The open doorway belonged to both. A breeze entered once again. It crossed the threshold, touched the hanging herbs, moved across the smooth arm of the rocking chair, then wandered toward the shelves. A single page inside an old notebook lifted ever so slightly. Only its corner, nothing more. When the breeze had passed, the page settled exactly where it had begun, as though it had only stretched for a moment. Emile noticed the old lantern hanging beside the door. It had not been lit all evening. Still, he wiped a tiny circle of dust from its glass with the edge of his sleeve. Not because it was needed tonight, because tomorrow deserved the same quiet care as today. He hung it back in its place. The lantern waited, without impatience. Across the garden, a spider continued weaving the final strands of its web. Its movements were almost impossible to follow. Every thread seemed to appear from nowhere, one after another, until the web simply existed. No thread asked to be admired. Together, they quietly became enough. Clara rested beside the porch. She listened to the river, then to the breeze, then to nothing at all. She smiled. Sometimes, the quietest part of the evening had the most to say. The moon slipped behind another cloud. The garden dimmed. The workshop grew warmer by comparison. No one reached for the lamp. No one wished for more light. The darkness seemed perfectly capable of carrying its share of the night. You looked once more toward the old bridge. Its reflection rested calmly upon the river. Then, a fish rose gently beneath the surface. Only a small circle spread across the water. The bridge became a ripple, then a reflection again. Nothing had been disturbed. The river had simply remembered that it was alive. You drew another slow breath. The cool air carried cedar, rosemary, damp earth, and something quieter still, the comforting scent of wood that had welcomed many evenings before this one. The village did not hold on to the night. The night did not hold on to the village. Still, they seemed perfectly content to keep one another company for as long as darkness chose to stay. The night rested gently over Millhaven, not because everything had become still, because everything had found its own quiet way of moving. The workshop glowed softly behind you. Outside, the garden carried the silver patience of the moon. Between them, the doorway remained exactly where it had always been, a place that belonged equally to both. The old lamp burned with a smaller flame now. Its glass had grown warm enough to soften every reflection. Nothing inside it looked sharp anymore. Even the light seemed to have slowed its breathing. Emile stepped quietly onto the porch. He noticed a small bowl resting beneath the rain barrel. During the evening, it had gathered a little rainwater left behind from an earlier shower. The surface lay perfectly still. Then, a tiny moth descended, not to drink, only to touch. For the briefest moment, its delicate legs kissed the water. Small circles spread across the bowl. The moon broke gently into silver fragments. The moth lifted again. The water slowly remembered its calm. Nothing had been disturbed. The evening had simply welcomed another small visitor. Across the garden, Clara stopped beside the old pear tree. One leaf had turned over during the breeze. Its lighter side faced the sky. She looked at it for a moment, then quietly continued walking. Leaves, like people, sometimes needed no help finding the side they wished to show the moon. Beyond the meadow, the river carried another patient reflection. A fish rose quietly beneath the surface, not high enough to break the water, only close enough that a faint shimmer passed across the current. For one heartbeat, the moon seemed to smile. Then, the river became a river again. The clocks continued. The breeze wandered. The herbs answered softly. The workshop waited without waiting. You noticed something you had never thought about before. No sound in Millhaven ever seemed lonely. Even the smallest one, always arrived with enough silence around it to feel welcome. You drew another slow breath. Nothing asked you to notice it, yet everything quietly allowed itself to be found. The night continued with the quiet confidence of something that had no destination. The mist wandered between the trees. The river wandered beneath the bridge. Moonlight wandered across the workshop floor. Nothing hurried toward morning. The rocking chair rested near the doorway. Its curved runners touched the old floorboards so lightly that they seemed to remember every gentle movement they had ever carried. Tonight, they carried only stillness. Emile paused beside the shelves. A small wooden music box stood quietly between two books. He lifted the lid. No melody followed. The spring had long since come to rest. He listened anyway, then closed the lid again with a grateful smile. Some quiet things never stop offering company, even after their music is gone. Outside, a single firefly appeared near the rosemary. Its light rose gently through the cool air. It drifted once above the herbs, paused, then floated toward the orchard. No straight line, only quiet curiosity. Its small light disappeared behind the branches. For a few breaths, the darkness looked exactly the same. Yet somehow, it felt as though the garden had become brighter. Clara noticed the old watering can beside the steps. A few drops still rested along its curved handle. She ran one finger beneath them. The water gathered quietly at her fingertip, then slipped back onto the grass. The earth accepted it without a sound. Nothing had fallen. It had simply returned. Far beyond the village, a faint breeze crossed the hills. The old windmill answered with one gentle turn. Only one. Then it became still again, as though the wind had stopped only to say good evening. The stars continued their patient watch above the fields. The river continued its quiet remembering. The clocks continued their faithful breathing. And somewhere, between the warm cedar walls, the cool garden air, and the silver path of the moon, you noticed something almost impossible to describe. The night never seemed to ask whether you belonged here. It simply continued until the question quietly disappeared on its own. You stood for another peaceful while, not searching, not arriving, not leaving, only sharing another ordinary moment that would never happen again, and somehow needed nothing more than to be exactly what it was. The night had become wonderfully familiar, not because it repeated itself, because it never hurried past what mattered. The workshop rested within its quiet circle of amber light. The garden rested beneath silver moonlight. Between them, the open doorway continued doing what it had done all evening. It welcomed both, without choosing between them. The breeze wandered in again. This time, it carried the faint scent of apples from beyond the orchard. Not the sweetness of fruit freshly picked, the quieter fragrance of apples resting patiently in the cool night air. It stayed only for a breath, then drifted onward. Emile stood near the old window. A tiny bead of condensation had gathered along the glass. He watched it for a moment. The droplet did not fall. It simply grew, almost invisibly, as another trace of coolness quietly joined it. Some things became complete, not by moving, but by patiently receiving. Across the room, Clara noticed the shadow of the rosemary swaying gently upon the wall. The plant itself hardly seemed to move, only its shadow wandered. She watched until the breeze settled again. The shadow became still. Neither moment seemed more beautiful than the other. Outside, the river carried the moon between its gentle ripples. For a little while, the reflection stretched into a long, silver ribbon. Then the current gathered it back together. Nothing had been broken. The river had only looked at the moon from another angle. Far beyond the meadow, the first hint of cool air from the hills drifted through the village. It touched the rooftops, the orchard, the old bridge, then quietly found its way to the workshop. The lamp answered with a softer glow, as though warmth itself knew how to welcome cooler things. You rested your hand upon the weathered railing. Its wood felt smoother now, not because it had changed, because your hand had stopped searching for imperfections. The clocks continued. The river continued. The breeze continued. And somewhere between one quiet breath and the next, the night gently reminded you that belonging sometimes begins the moment you stop asking whether it has. The night carried its silence with quiet confidence. It no longer felt delicate. It felt enduring. The workshop remained warm enough for comfort. The garden remained cool enough for deep breaths. The moon remained patient enough to visit every familiar corner before morning. Emile walked slowly toward the porch. He paused beside the old lantern hanging near the door. Its glass reflected both the lamp behind him and the moon before him. For one peaceful moment, it carried two lights without belonging to either. He smiled, then quietly continued on. Clara stood beneath the old linden. A single leaf drifted silently onto her shoulder. She noticed it only when the breeze carried it away again. She did not reach after it. Some gentle meetings were complete the moment they happened. Beyond the garden wall, a fox crossed the edge of the meadow once more. Its footsteps disappeared into the mist almost immediately. Only the grass remembered, for a little while, that something had passed. The river moved beneath the bridge. The bridge rested above the river. Neither interrupted the other. Together, they completed a journey that neither could make alone. You looked toward the quiet workshop, the rocking chair, the folded blanket, the old shelves, the cedar beams. Nothing waited for tomorrow. Everything seemed quietly fulfilled by simply being part of this night. A breeze crossed the porch. The lamp leaned gently. The curtain answered. The rosemary nodded once. The silence welcomed them all. You breathed in cedar, cool earth, lavender, the faint sweetness of apples. They arrived together. none trying to become the first thing you noticed. Above, the stars remained scattered across the wide sky. Some shone brightly, others only faintly. Yet together, they made the darkness feel endless and somehow gentle. You remained where you were. The night asked nothing. The village explained nothing. Even your thoughts seemed content to rest where they had quietly arrived. And as another peaceful breath found its place beside the last, it occurred to you that perhaps the kindest places in the world are not the ones that promise you happiness. They are the ones that never ask you to be anything before they offer you peace. The night had forgotten the need to become later. It simply continued, one gentle breath at a time. The workshop rested within its familiar warmth. The lamp had grown smaller still. Its quiet flame no longer reached across the room. Instead, it seemed content to illuminate only what was nearest: the edge of the workbench, the folded blanket, the smooth curve of the rocking chair. The rest belonged peacefully to the moon. Outside, the mist had thinned until it seemed woven into the meadow itself. It no longer covered the grass. It simply shared the same quiet space. Emil stepped toward the open doorway. He paused without intending to. The cool air met the warmth rising from the cedar floor. For one peaceful breath, neither moved. Then both quietly continued. He rested one hand against the weathered frame. The wood felt familiar beneath his fingertips. Not because he remembered every mark, because the wood never expected him to. Across the garden, a single branch lowered beneath another bead of dew. The droplet remained there, holding both the moon and the lamp inside its tiny curved surface. Neither reflection was complete, yet neither seemed incomplete. Clara noticed the old lantern hanging beside the porch. Its handle had turned ever so slightly in the breeze. She steadied it with one gentle touch, not to stop it moving forever, only to let it become still for as long as it wished. The breeze understood. A few moments later, the lantern quietly swayed again. No one corrected it. Beyond the orchard, the river carried another small circle across its surface. Perhaps a fish, perhaps a falling seed, perhaps only the current greeting itself. No answer followed. None was needed. The clocks breathed their familiar rhythm. The herbs answered the wind. The mist welcomed the moon. And somewhere between all those quiet exchanges, you realized something curious. At no point had the evening asked you to remain. It had simply never given you a reason to leave. The night rested easily upon the village. It wore the rooftops, the gardens, the river, with the quiet familiarity of something returning home. The workshop no longer seemed brighter than the garden, nor darker. It had simply become another gentle part of the same evening. The lamp continued its patient glow. Outside, moonlight rested among the rosemary. Neither one competed with the other. Warm light knew where to stop. Moonlight knew where to begin. Between them, the doorway never needed to choose. Emil crossed the room once more. A small wooden chair stood slightly turned toward the window. He placed one hand upon its back, turned it only enough that it faced both the garden and the workbench. Not entirely one, not entirely the other. It seemed happier there. He left it without another thought. Clara walked slowly beneath the old linden. One tiny feather rested among the grass. The breeze lifted it, carried it no farther than a single step, then laid it down again. She watched, smiled, and continued walking. The feather had never truly belonged to one place. Perhaps that was why it traveled so lightly. Far beyond the fields, the hills had become little more than soft shadows beneath the stars. Their edges had disappeared into the sky. Neither had borrowed from the other. Distance had simply become gentler. A single cricket paused. Another quietly continued. The silence between them felt as natural as either song. The river touched the bridge. The bridge welcomed the river. The mist welcomed the meadow. The night welcomed them all, without ever asking them to become anything else. You remained beside the doorway, the cedar beneath your hand, the cool air upon your face, the faint fragrance of lavender, the slow breathing of the clocks behind you. For a little while, the evening asked nothing of your thoughts, nothing of your memories, nothing of tomorrow. It simply offered another quiet place where nothing needed to be earned before it could be gently received. And perhaps that is why, when you finally looked toward the path beyond the garden, it no longer felt like a road leading away. It simply looked like another quiet place the night had already promised to visit in time. The night had become almost effortless. Nothing within it seemed to be trying anymore. The workshop rested quietly beneath its familiar roof. The lamp still glowed beside the workbench. Its amber light had grown smaller, yet somehow the room felt larger than before. Outside, the moon drifted higher above the orchard. Its light reached the tops of the pear leaves first, then slowly descended through the branches. One leaf brightened, another remained in shadow. Together, they completed the same tree. Emile stepped quietly toward the porch. The old wooden steps answered beneath his weight, not with complaint, only with recognition. The sound was soft, as though the timber remembered that careful footsteps never needed to hurry. He rested beside the railing. A tiny spider's web stretched between two weathered posts. Dew rested upon each delicate thread. The web itself was almost invisible. Only the droplets revealed where it had always been. He watched for a moment, then looked away. Some beautiful things never ask to be looked at for long. They ask only to be noticed kindly. Across the garden, Clara walked beneath the pear tree. A single pear had finally loosened from its branch. It rested quietly among the grass. She smiled. The tree had not lost anything. The earth had simply received what was ready. Beyond the meadow, the river carried another ribbon of moonlight beneath the bridge. For a little while, the reflection stretched between the old wooden posts, then quietly gathered itself again. Nothing had become less beautiful, only differently seen. The breeze wandered through the rosemary. Its fragrance crossed the porch, touched the doorway, then disappeared into the workshop. The cedar welcomed it. Neither scent remained unchanged. Each quietly borrowed something from the other. The clocks continued. The stars continued. The mist continued its slow breathing above the fields. And somewhere, between the warm wood, the cool grass, and the quiet river, you noticed that the evening never seemed to ask whether it had been enough. It simply continued offering itself, without wondering how it would be remembered. The village rested beneath a sky that seemed endlessly patient. The stars no longer felt distant. They simply felt unhurried. The workshop remained quietly awake. Its old cedar beams held both warmth and silence with equal ease. The lamp burned lower still. The moon reached farther across the floor. Neither light hurried to fill the room. They trusted one another's quiet work. Emile paused beside the old bookshelf. One small wooden carving rested between two well-worn books. No taller than his hand, its edges had grown smooth from years of being lifted, admired, and gently returned. He picked it up, turned it once beneath the lamp, then placed it back exactly where it belonged. Not because it needed protecting, because some familiar things quietly protect us. Outside, the breeze wandered toward the orchard. A few leaves answered. Others remained still. The tree never asked them to move together. It had always trusted each leaf to find its own conversation with the wind. Clara stood beside the rain barrel. The water reflected only a narrow piece of the sky. A cloud drifted across that small reflection, then passed. She never looked upward to compare. The little piece of sky within the water was already enough. Far beyond the meadow, a sheep bell rang once. The sound traveled gently across the sleeping fields. It grew softer, then softer still, until the night quietly folded it into silence. No echo lingered. None was needed. The river flowed beneath the bridge. The bridge rested above the river. Neither completed the other. Each simply allowed the other to remain fully itself. You stood once more between the doorway and the garden. The cedar carried the memory of daylight. The air carried the promise of dawn. Neither belonged to yesterday. Neither belonged to tomorrow. Both quietly belonged to this single breath. The clocks continued their faithful rhythm. The stars continued their patient watch. The village continued, without ever asking whether anyone was watching. And perhaps that was why every quiet thing here felt so deeply alive, because nothing lived for the sake of being seen. It simply lived. The night had grown beautifully quiet, not because the sounds had faded, because they had learned where to rest. The workshop stood within its familiar circle of light. The lamp burned softly. Its flame no longer reached for the corners. The corners had already become friends with the dark. Outside, the meadow shimmered beneath countless beads of dew. Each one held a little of the moon. None tried to hold all of it. Emile rested his hand upon the porch railing. The wood felt cool, smooth, steady. He traced one shallow groove with his thumb, not to remember it, simply because his hand had found it again. The railing had never asked to be noticed, yet over many evenings, it had quietly become familiar. Across the garden, Clara paused beside the rosemary. A tiny droplet rested on one narrow leaf. The breeze arrived. The leaf bent. The droplet slipped gently onto another. The first leaf rose. The second bowed. Nothing had fallen. The balance had simply changed its shape. Far beyond the orchard, the river carried the moon beneath the bridge once more. The current curved around the old wooden posts, not avoiding them, not resisting them, only making room for both water and wood. The bridge remained, the river continued. Neither asked the other to become easier. The clocks breathed. The cedar held the day's last warmth. The cool air wandered quietly through the doorway. Everything seemed to know exactly how much of itself to offer the night. You looked toward the garden. Nothing seemed to be waiting. Not the trees, not the river, not even the stars. Perhaps peace begins when nothing expects the next moment to be better than this one. The evening carried on, as though it had forgotten there was such a thing as time. The workshop remained gently awake. The garden remained gently still. Between them, the doorway continued its quiet work, welcoming, never separating. A soft breeze wandered inside. The curtain lifted, then settled again. It did not return to exactly the same place, only to a place equally at peace. Emile noticed a tiny pine cone resting near the edge of the porch. Perhaps the wind had carried it there days ago, perhaps much longer. He picked it up, turned it once beneath the moon, then placed it beneath the old linden, not because it belonged there more, only because the tree would understand it. Clara rested beside the rain barrel. The water reflected only a few stars now. The rest remained beyond its quiet circle. She smiled. A small reflection had never tried to become the whole sky. Some things are complete long before they become large. Beyond the meadow, the breeze crossed the river. Tiny ripples answered. The moon stretched gently across them, then gathered itself again. Nothing had been lost. Light had only remembered how to move with water. The clocks continued. The herbs continued their patient fragrance. The old bridge remained exactly where another generation had left it. The village neither held on nor let go. It simply trusted that everything would find its own quiet rhythm. You remained where you were. There was nowhere else the evening expected you to be. The lamp glowed behind you. The stars rested above you. The cool earth waited beneath you. And somewhere between them all, you realized that perhaps the kindest nights are not the ones that make us forget the world. They are the ones that quietly remind us we have always belonged to it. The night had become very still, not silent, simply unhurried. The lamp continued its quiet glow, smaller now, warmer somehow. Its light rested gently upon the workbench, then slowly faded into the room. Outside, the moon stood a little higher. Its silver light drifted across the old pear tree. Leaf by leaf, branch by branch, never all at once. Emile stepped onto the porch. He did not look toward the village or toward the river. He simply stood where warm cedar met cool night air. A slow breeze arrived. The sleeve of his sweater moved slightly. Nothing else. For a little while, even the breeze seemed content to stay nearby. Across the garden, Clara noticed one small feather resting among the grass. She watched it without wondering where it had come from. Some gentle things do not become more beautiful by knowing their story. The river continued beneath the bridge. Its voice had become softer, not because the water had slowed, because the night had grown deeper. One quiet ripple crossed the moon, then disappeared. The moon remained. The water continued. Neither one seemed surprised. The clocks breathed. The herbs answered the breeze. The old beams held the last warmth of the day. Everything seemed to know when enough was enough. You drew another slow breath. Nothing called your attention. Nothing wished to impress you. The evening simply remained beside you, quietly, like someone who understands that companionship does not always need conversation. The night carried itself with extraordinary gentleness. There was nowhere it needed to arrive, nothing it wished to finish. The workshop rested exactly as it was. The rocking chair, the folded blanket, the cedar shelves, the old clocks. Nothing asked to become different. Outside, the mist wandered slowly across the meadow. It paused around the old footpath, then quietly continued, as though even the mist preferred not to hurry. Emile rested his hand upon the weathered railing. The wood felt cool, familiar, steady. He closed his eyes, only for a breath. When he opened them again, nothing had changed. And somehow, that felt like a gift. Clara listened to the river, then to the silence between the river and the breeze. She smiled very softly. Sometimes, the quietest part of the evening is the place where everything else comes to rest. A single leaf let go of the old pear tree. It drifted without choosing a direction. The breeze carried it. The moon watched it. The grass welcomed it. No one hurried to decide where it belonged. The night already knew. The stars rested above the village. The river rested within its banks. The workshop rested inside its quiet light. And you, without quite noticing when, had stopped waiting for the evening to become more peaceful. Because somewhere between one slow breath and the next, it already had. The night had become almost weightless. The workshop, the garden, the river, none of them seemed separate anymore. Only different ways for the same quiet evening to exist. The lamp still glowed, its flame, small now, steady, certain. Outside, the moon rested above Millhaven. Its light no longer wandered. It simply remained where it was needed. A gentle breeze crossed the porch. It touched the old railing, the rosemary, the rocking chair, then quietly moved on. Nothing followed it. Nothing wished it to stay. Emile stood beneath the doorway. His hands rested peacefully at his sides. He watched the garden without looking for anything. The garden asked nothing in return. Clara listened, not to the river, not to the breeze, only to the quiet that gently held them both. The clocks continued, one patient breath, then another. Their rhythm no longer sounded like time, only companionship. Far beyond the meadow, the hills rested beneath the stars. The stars rested within the sky. The sky rested above the village. Everything seemed beautifully supported by something else. You closed your eyes, only for a moment. The breeze remained. The river remained. The lamp remained. Nothing disappeared, simply because you were no longer watching. And somehow, that made the night feel even kinder. You breathed in cedar, lavender, cool earth, the faint sweetness of fruit. Then, very slowly, you breathed out. The night did the same. The night continued, exactly as nights always have. Quietly, patiently, without asking anyone to notice. The workshop rested within its familiar warmth. The garden rested within its familiar silence. The river rested within its endless journey. Nothing had finished. Nothing needed to. The lamp still carried its gentle flame. The moon still carried its gentle light. Neither hurried toward morning. They trusted dawn to arrive when it was ready. Emile quietly closed the workshop door. Not completely, just enough to leave a narrow space where the cool night air could still come and go. Clara looked once more toward the garden, then toward the river. She smiled, not because she was saying goodbye, only because there was no need to. The rocking chair remained, the blanket remained, the old clocks continued, the cedar remembered, the bridge welcomed, the river wandered, the stars watched, without expectation, without effort, without ever asking to be remembered. You stood there for one last quiet breath. Nothing asked you to stay. Nothing asked you to leave. The evening simply remained, exactly as it had welcomed you. Gentle, patient, unhurried. And perhaps That is what the kindest places quietly know. They never close their doors. They simply leave a little space for anyone who may one day find their way back. Good night. Millhaven will be here whenever the night brings you home.